Hey there, internet friends, and welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions of the thing. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, so if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it, but if you can't, no big deal. The fact that you're listening is awesome, and of course, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Rebellion is built on hope.
All right. I was wondering what you were going to go with. We
I
have...
almost went with Rogue. Rogue One.
That would have been very infitting with your like pregnant pauses in that segue. Anyway, we're also joined by Frank Bizzani. How you doing, Frank?
Doing good. I'm very excited to talk about this movie. I love this one.
Yep. And Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
Doing good. I got notes. I got thoughts. I got feelings. Ready to go.
All right. Well, since Cameron didn't take it, I will take it. I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me.
It was on my list.
I was definitely expecting that to be the one, since it is so repeated. But yes, today is all about Rogue One, a Star Wars story. What were you gonna say, Frank?
I was just gonna say I kind of wanted to go with the "This is hope" from like Leia at the end.
There
like,
you go. Yeah,
like "This is hope."
Yeah.
To go bounce off of Cameron's.
Yeah, no. As far as like the Force is with me, I'm one with the Force. Line. Just like I did not remember it being said that much.
Oh yeah.
We'll talk about that for sure.
Yeah, his whole like repeating it as he's getting his like final moment in the sun kind of thing. Yeah. So yes, today all about Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Oh, and we lost Logan's video again. We've been running into issues with Logan today on the podcast, so we're going to give him a second here to see if he makes his way back into the episode. His Discord like basically seems to not be playing nicely in the very poor closet space he is like recording from. So yeah, well, while we wait for him, so of course this is a continuation of our Summer of Star Wars. We have been doing all summer. We've been doing the Skywalker saga, and then we kind of moved into the standalone films last week with the Clone Wars, the animated film, and now we are into Rogue One. We'll have, of course, Solo next week, and then we will close our Summer of Star Wars out with the Empire of Dreams documentary. So yeah, fun Rogue One. This is the last one like that I know of that I'm like, well, actually, no, I'm excited to talk about Solo too. But like this is definitely, I guess, as a return to form after the animated one last week, I'm excited to be back talking about this one because yes, I like Rogue One quite a bit. So a little bit of the history lesson for you. This was originally released December 16th, 2016. Other notable releases we had of the time were Captain America Civil War that had come out earlier that year on May 6th. That's where we were at kind of in the MCU of things. So that also was the introduction of Spider-Man into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We also had X-Men Apocalypse happening still on the Fox side of things at that point. Came out May 27th, and I will always remember that movie because we saw it as like a community at Kind of Funny Live 2 that like weekend, and when the Fox logo came on, like that got probably the biggest laugh because it was like a bit on one of the shows at the time, and that got like the biggest laugh of the evening, and the handful of people that weren't in the Kind of Funny community for that were probably like, what is going on? Like, why, what happened? What did I miss? And then the movie was just downhill from there.
Oh yeah, totally.
100%.
Later in the year, back more around the actual release of this, we had Doctor Strange came out November 4th. We had Arrival came out November 11th. We had Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them came out November 18th. We had the not controversial, but controversial in how it was revealed, Oscar winner Moonlight came out November 18th as well. Moana on the Disney side of things came out November 23rd. La La Land, the other, big movie of that year, came out December 9th. And the movie that ultimately kicked this one out of the top spot was Hidden Figures, that came out January 6th, 2017. This had like a good run at the top of the end of the year box office for a few weeks there, and then Hidden Figures kind of came along and bumped it down.
That's a funny year for me personally too, because that's the year I moved to Austin. So that first half of the year where you're mentioning like Civil War and that stuff, I saw with you guys,
Mhm.
and then in Arizona, or for Apocalypse we were in San Francisco. But then and then the last half, like La La Land and Rogue One and all that, I saw here in Austin. So I just think that's like a weird, funny thing.
Yeah, there you go. Our life around movies. This has a runtime of 2 hours and 13 minutes. And in the Star Wars timeline of things, this occurred, as we've discussed kind of previously on the show, in between The Force Awakens, which had come out December 18th of 2015, and The Last Jedi, which would come out December 15th, 2017. So basically they had like a run of December movies, one movie a year there. For a brief little while, that would then get spoiled by Solo having to get like bumped out of, I think, the like holiday time slot or whatever. A little bit of the roll call, and again, hopefully Logan will come back in here, because in the video version all this framing is really messed up and I do not have time to adjust it on the fly and try and fix things here. The director, of course, Gareth Edwards, who I guess not relatively unknown, but like did not have an extensive career going into this. His biggest films, obviously, prior to this were Monsters was kind of like his first film, and then Godzilla, of course, was the big one, where he kind of like brought Godzilla back to the big screen after many years since for a Western audience at least, the Godzilla prior to that was the 1999 one with Matthew Broderick. So like this was a seemingly return to form for Godzilla. We had and then he really hasn't done anything since the Rogue One. Like that was kind of his last big thing. So waiting to see what's next from Gareth Edwards, certainly.
We'll talk about a swan song then.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
solid send off so far. Chris Weitz and Tony Gilroy are kind of the screenplay writers here, as well as the original story by John Knoll and the Rogue One himself, Gary Whitta. Chris Weitz, all the way back to Ants, he wrote the screenplay for Ants with Woody Allen, as well as the screenplay for The Nutty Professor 2, The Clumps, About a Boy, The Golden Compass, the 2015 live-action Cinderella, and then after this, he did the film The Mountain Between Us, and is also the screenwriter for the upcoming live-action Pinocchio, which I don't know much about, but I do know it has Tom Hanks as Geppetto. So you got that one coming. Remind me, is there somebody on this that really hates Jiminy Cricket? Somebody I know really hates Jiminy Cricket, and I thought it was somebody on like on one of our podcasts or something. But
no, why would anybody hate Jiminy Cricket?
I don't.
Such a weird take.
I don't remember, but yeah, there's somebody out there in my circles that's like that really despises Jiminy Cricket. I don't remember.
Jiminy Cricket is like a long-standing, like a long-suffering, like poor office worker, basically. Who in like caseworker who has to deal with like the most awful child.
I mean, yeah. Anyway,
does this person also hate social workers? Like, what's their deal?
I don't remember who it was. So, one of the other writers here is Tony Gilroy, who had written The Devil's Advocate, as well as he was one of the other screenwriters for Armageddon with J.J. Abrams that we talked about in recent weeks. He also wrote the Bourne films, The Bourne Identity, Supremacy, Ultimatum, and Legacy, as well as I feel like controversial is the way to describe it, the Great Wall film that was basically like Matt Damon in China. And then he is the credited writer for the upcoming Andor series for Disney Plus, about the character of this film, Cassian Andor.
What's interesting is like about that Great Wall film, apparently Matt Damon's kid like incessantly makes fun of him about it. Like
Yeah.
whenever she's like upset at him, she just reminds him that he was in that movie consistently.
Yeah.
And it's just like you did this. Like you are like how dumb.
She just pulls up a photo and she's like, "This you?"
This
Mhm.
you? Yeah. This
Nice.
you, Dad, with the top knot and ponytail? Huh?
Yeah. I don't know, Logan, why Discord doesn't want you to talk about Rogue One with us. But I'm just seeing that in the Discord chat now as your avatar at least has popped back up. I don't know if you're
Yeah.
there with us. Oh, hey, we can hear you.
Okay, so we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, yeah, I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay, so you're gonna try and like stick with us, but no video.
I'm gonna try to see if that helps, because it's just a Discord issue. Everything else in my laptop is working fine, just not Discord.
Okay. Well, then I'm gonna try and take a second here to reshuffle some faces around because that again screws up the like the visuals
algorithms.
of not the algorithms. No, just it shifts the Discord around and that screws up the framing that I have on the video. So there we go. Okay. But yes, Logan, get better goddamn internet. Or
Dear
you know,
God.
not a MacBook. That keeps
I have a
sucking.
new MacBook, and then of course the microphone doesn't work for that MacBook. I have to
Yeah,
get a new mic.
Was it the microphone didn't work, or was it the MacBook sucks and doesn't have a USB drive?
Who can say?
Yeah,
Who can say?
it's
Really?
almost like Macs are terrible. Anyway, so you missed us talking about the director, the writers, and a lot of the like films around this era. But we are up to John Knoll, who is primarily a visual effect supervisor at ILM, Industrial Light and Magic. And this film is basically his sole writing credit. So, you know, this is certainly a banger of a of a debut in screenwriting. But then, of course, he was also helped out breaking the original story down by, as I mentioned earlier, the Rogue One Gary Whitta, who prior to this had done films like The Book of Eli, as well as The Walking Dead game and After Earth. Longtime games industry person, going back to his days as like an editor for PC Gamer magazine and stuff like that. But after this film, he would go on to write a handful of episodes of Star Wars Rebels, which I believe that and the like the comics that he did, because he also wrote like the comic adaptation of Star Wars The Last Jedi, which I believe he touted as making him the first and potentially only writer who had written for Star Wars TV, like books, comics, and film. So shout out to him being like super into the Star Wars writing verse. He is also the man behind the lore of the upcoming game Forspoken, which if you remember was the one that had that trailer where the woman was like, "Is that a fucking dragon?" And everybody really loved that line. And of course, he can be seen regularly on Kind of Funny Games Daily. And he had a brief run of Twitch fame last year when he did the animal talk show in Animal Crossing. So shout out to Gary Whitta. He's been very cool when I've met him at Kind of Funny events and stuff. I remember,
Agreed.
like before we went and saw a baseball game at the prom one, I think he was.
Yep.
Like he was at
Watching
the bar
the
with us
soccer game?
watching a soccer game. Yeah, that was a cool little hangout with him. But yeah,
At the prom after party, I told him, I was like, yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to congratulations on like getting the opportunity to like write the comic book adaptation of The Last Jedi. And he goes, oh yeah, he goes, do you like The Last Jedi? I was like, yeah, like it's like, yeah, like I have my problems with it, like everybody I think does, but like, you know, it is what it is. And he goes, cool. He goes, what do you think about that throne fight scene? I was like, I love it. It's awesome. And he goes, want to see something cool? I was like, of course. And I'm like, nobody ever says no when nobody should ever say no when somebody asks him that question.
yeah.
And he goes, good answer. And he pulls out his phone and he shows me the the final draft version of the panels before like text has been laid over them or anything's been laid over top of them. So it's just the artwork of the fight scene, of the throne fight scene in the comic book. And he was like just showing it to me. We're in a room full of people. People are like loud talking, music's playing, and here I am geeking out over cool Star Wars art with Gary Whitta. Like the dude is 100% legit. Like just the coolest, chillest guy you could ever meet. Unless you suck, in which case he hates you and he'll let you know.
Yeah, very true.
I don't know that personally, but I've definitely seen him go off on people. So
Yeah. Diving into the cast, we have, of course, starring Felicity Jones as Jyn Erso here. She had a handful of TV projects leading up to this, including Doctor Who. She was one of the house guests in the Agatha Christie themed episode "The Unicorn and the Wasp." Or she might have even been the maid. I don't remember who she played in that specifically, but she was one of the people at that in that episode.
I think she might have been the maid. Yeah.
She was also Felicity. I forget the character's name, but the black cat in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 with Andrew Garfield, kind of setting up that character that never went anywhere. And then she was in The Theory of Everything prior to this. And then she played Ruth Bader Ginsburg in On the Basis of Sex after this film came out. We have
terrible name for marketing.
For on the Basis of Sex for marketing. Yeah, probably.
Like so many
It's just
places
not a
out there,
great.
like,
It's just like a very fine movie. Like that to me is like very much like a 6 or 7 film.
I mean,
yeah, but it's about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, so it's automatically a 10. So
there you go. The
RBG,
notorious RBG. We have Diego Luna playing Cassian Andor, who had a lot of Spanish language projects prior to this. The first ones I really recognized were Y Tu Mama Tambien. And then he was also in Dirty Dancing Havana Nights.
He was.
He was also in the film Milk and
yes.
Elysium. And then
he's awesome in Elysium.
Following this, he was in Narcos Mexico. And then, as I mentioned earlier, he is also in an upcoming Disney Plus series based on the character of Cassian Andor, titled appropriately Andor. So, shout out to that.
Preview stuff about that has looked super cool, by the way.
Yeah, I will also shout him out here. So there's I imagine it's still there. I don't know how much play it gets like these days, but in downtown Disney, there is a like immersive VR experience where like you put on a VR set and like a backpack, and they put you in a room and like you navigate around this like room in the virtual space and stuff. And he's basically like the one giving you the mission for it. And he came in and did kind of like performance work for that and stuff. And so I remember him giving me, Ben Bellevue, and Beasley, Lauren Wilson, instructions alongside like our fourth random person that was in our squad. And then, so it was like him and K2SO basically giving us instructions. And then we're like on Mustafar or some other, like, I think it was Mustafar because it was basically like a lava planet. And we're, working to try and like capture some plans or something like that. And ultimately it ends with like a battle with, like Darth Vader before we like escape. But it was really cool, like incredibly awesome. Like, oh, hey, VR is really cool when it's like actually up and moving around kind of stuff. Yeah, that was a lot of fun on that one. Speaking of K2SO, we have Alan Tudyk in playing that role, who I remember first seeing and really, really enjoying in A Knight's Tale.
It's a great movie.
And then he was also, of course, in Firefly and Serenity. He was also in, as I've talked about, I think on the show before, Spamalot, which I got to see. Like I got to see him in that show on Broadway, which is really cool. He was also Steve the Pirate in Dodgeball.
Yes,
he was.
As well as the
Hells yeah, Alan Tudyk is Steve the Pirate.
Yeah. Yep. He's the robot in iRobot. And then he has done just so many VO roles that I just did not bother like logging all of them, but some highlights there include Wreck-It Ralph and Frozen. He was also a very racist character in 42, and I remember talking with a friend of mine, them being like, wow, I really hate this. Like, I really hate that Alan Tudyk is playing this character. I'm like, well, yeah, they needed somebody to get to be that player, to be the one like calling Jackie Robinson the N-word and stuff like that. And like, I'm sure nobody really wants that role, but like, if you can get like a likable actor in there, maybe it'll like dampen the blow a little bit.
Oh, for sure. Like that's why they had Michael Fassbender be like this, like brutally racist slave owner in 12 Years a Slave.
There you go.
It's because everybody really loves Michael Fassbender, and then all of a sudden he's like the super religious racist like monster in 12 Years a Slave, and everybody's like, you know what? We've cooled on him. Still love him, but we've cooled.
Yeah.
You need that kind of like goodwill where people don't leave the film thinking, I think that guy might actually feel that way about black people. Like, you need somebody who, like, you can leave the film not thinking that about.
Yeah,
So,
and then I
Alan
imagine
Tudyk, I think, fits that role.
I imagine people that do feel complicated thoughts about Fassbender after that just go and watch Shame and, you know, are enamored by his big old dong. So
I don't know anybody who, like, I don't know why anybody who, like, I watched Shame. Shame did not make, I like, sure, it's an impressive, you know, part of it, his body. Yeah. But I would also say, like, that's like a horribly depressing movie.
I mean,
he's
yeah.
That's a downer, man.
Yeah, that's a down. Like, that might be
never would
like,
have guessed from the name, you guys.
Yeah, it is a, like, that is a film. Like, it is really well done, really well acted. Like, it's terrific. Michael Fassbender is incredible in it, and looks incredible in it. But I don't know how anybody pays attention to be like, oh yeah, look at that, like, great looking bod and dong, and then also, like, just somehow can, like, block out just like the trauma he's going through in that film.
I believe it's referred to as, like, watching it with the sound off. Anyway, the last little one I had logged here for Alan Tudyk is he is in the wonderful animated series Harley Quinn. He plays he plays a ton of roles on there, but the main ones he plays are Clayface, as well as he is that series Joker. So playing that eponymous VO role. Donnie Yen playing Chirrut Imwe here, who has a career dating back to 1984, doing a whole bunch of stuff, again, much like Diego Luna, a whole bunch of stuff I don't recognize because it was like a lot of Chinese films. But he was in Blade 2, as well as Shanghai Nights, which I remember seeing that as a kid. And then
love Shanghai Nights.
Shortly after this, he would do Triple X Return of Xander Cage. He was also in the live action Mulan film. And then he is slated to be attached to upcoming projects like John Wick 4 and Sleeping Dogs, a film adaptation of the video game.
That's going to be rad.
Yeah, he'd be great in that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I will say, like, he's really great. If you haven't seen him, like, the film series that you should probably watch him in, at least watch the first one, is Ip Man.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, Ip Man is a, like, legendary martial arts film.
The whole trilogy is fantastic.
Yeah, the whole trilogy is incredible. But, like, especially the first one, I feel, because it's a very different film from the next two. Because the first one's very much set up to be more autobiographical.
Mm-hmm.
And then the following two are a bit more, like, I wouldn't say fantastical, but definitely they take kind of like a bigger draw on the suspension of disbelief.
Very bloody. Yeah.
We have Wen Jiang playing Baze Malbus here. And similarly, a lot of Chinese film projects. None of them really caught my eye as something I was familiar with or of note. But you know, good long career on the other side of the Pacific. Ben Mendelsohn playing Orson Krennic, who much like a lot of these people, very lengthy career of like Australian TV and film projects. He started kind of making his way into more mainstream Hollywood-based fare with The Dark Knight Rises. And then in recent years, he's had a good run of playing like the villain character, including, of course, this film, as well as Ready Player One and Robin Hood 2018. As bad as Robin Hood 2018 is, he's a good element of it as the Sheriff of Nottingham, really like, you know, engaging in the scenery chewing badness of it. And then he is, of course, he kind of subverts that a little bit in Captain Marvel, where he's playing you think he's a bad guy in that one. He is also slated to be in the upcoming series Secret Invasion. So that'll be a fun one. Guy Henry takes on the role of Governor Tarkin here. I noted this because I thought it was very cute. His first role was as Sherlock Holmes in Young Sherlock, The Mystery of the Manor House in 1982. So, you know, that was cute being a child actor and getting to play Sherlock Holmes as your first role. More notable fare, he's been in V for Vendetta. He was in the Rome series for, I think that was Stars. And he is in
HBO, I think
he is Pious Thickness in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, who,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, now that I actually think about who that character is, I think that's one of the ones that's like, is that one of the ones that like the kids like polyjuice into? No, I don't know. Anyway.
No, that's Crab and Goyle, right?
No,
that's in Chamber of Secrets. But
in the
Hallows,
in the last
okay.
movie where they basically like break into the Ministry of Magic as people.
Yeah, as like adults.
Yeah. Anyway, he was in those films. Forrest Whitaker playing Saw Gerrera here. I did not know this until looking at his IMDb, but he was in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I've never actually watched that movie. I just kind of know.
Movie.
It's a fine film. It's a film that also
iconic moments of it, of course. But
the iconic moment that everybody knows from that film.
Yeah.
Nick Cage is also in that movie.
Yeah, who?
Nick Cage. Like he's in one scene as a guy flipping burgers. It's like his first role ever.
Yeah. Fast Time at Ridgemont High like launched a lot of careers, but like none of them were like very few of them were like the actual like starring roles. That is a film that like is outside of teachers is almost completely devoid of any adults, and it's very disturbing.
All right.
Also, Sean Penn rules as the surfer dude.
Yeah.
Who orders a pizza to his classroom.
Spicoli, right?
Spicoli.
Yeah.
Spicoli, yeah.
Anyway, Forrest Whitaker also in Platoon and Good Morning Vietnam.
Yeah.
Other, iconic
Great
films
movies.
of that era. Yeah. The first one I probably ever saw him in was Panic Room, and especially knowing me, I have no idea why I saw Panic Room.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing that. I remember seeing Panic Room in theaters and like because you got Jodie Foster in there, you got Jared Leto, you got Forrest Whitaker, and I just remember, I remember being like, why am I watching this movie? I was tense the whole damn time. Anyway, he was also in The Last King of Scotland. Lee Daniels,
phenomenal in that.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
He's great
Oh
in
my
that.
god.
I don't know who just like super breathed into the mic, but that was loud.
Logan.
We had he's also in Arrival, which, as I mentioned, came out about a month before this one. And of course, he would go on to be in Black Panther after this. He would also return to the role of Saw Gerrera in a handful of Star Wars projects, including Star Wars Rebels and Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. He was in the Netflix musical from the last holiday season, Jingle Jangle, A Christmas Journey, which I really enjoyed. I think he is really good in that. And I think this is actually coming out this weekend or something, but he is in Respect, the Aretha Franklin biopic, I believe, as Aretha's father in that. So go check that out if you want to go see him playing some dramatic Oscar Beatty kind of role stuff. You have Riz Ahmed playing Bodhi Rook, a.k.a. Riz MC. I will never forget how it blew my mind as somebody who loved the Immigrant Song in the Hamilton mixtape album, realizing that Riz MC, aka Riz Ahmed, is one of the people on that. And like when I put two and two together of like, wait, that was the guy from Rogue One. Awesome. That was really cool. He's also in Nightcrawler. He was in the Jason Bourne film. So not, one of the Bourne Identity, blah, 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 but the Jason Bourne one, kind of the return after Jeremy Renner took a stab at it. He was also in, after this, he would go on to be in Venom. He was in Weathering with You, which I saw with Cameron. He's in the, one of the, he plays the voice of the detective in the English dub of that film. And then he had a very powerful performance that earned him, I believe, an Oscar nomination last year for Sound of Metal. So shout out to Riz Ahmed. Last of the big names here, we have Mads Mikkelsen, of course, playing Galen Erso. Threw this in here. I'm glad Logan was able to make it back in time for this because, of course, I had to call out that he was in Casino Royale. Much like the theme of everybody else here, he also is in like a handful of, I think, film projects from Denmark, I believe is where he's from. Yeah. Prior to like really kind of making it in the more Hollywood fare of things, but yeah, Casino Royale. His probably real breakout success was playing the titular character in the series Hannibal, much beloved by people of that series. And then he was Caecilius in Doctor Strange, a month earlier, the bad guy in that one in the MCU. He would go on to be in, of course, Death Stranding. And then he also had a powerful turn that got a lot of like awards buzz in the last year or two with Another Round.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about.
I mentioned, of course, in the movies around this time, Fantastic Beasts 1 had come out. He will be taking on the role of Gellert Grindelwald in Fantastic Beasts 3 whenever that comes out. So the third actor to portray that role, really. I mean, at least he's like, well, I like Colin Farrell, of course, in it.
Colin Farrell was so good, yeah.
But yeah, so you know, they're betting.
Colin Farrell was fun until they revealed that it was actually Johnny Depp.
Yeah,
Didn't like this. Didn't like that.
Yeah,
so no,
they're
no
betting,
one liked it.
You know, they're betting 2 for 3, 2 for
yeah.
3 actors for that role in this one, and then he's also going to be in the upcoming Indiana Jones 5 whenever that comes out. Some returning performers / cameos that I wanted to highlight here. Of course, Jimmy Smits making a return as Bail Organa. Genevieve O'Reilly returning as Mon Mothma after originally being cast in that role for Revenge of the Sith and playing her in, I think, one scene that makes its way into the movie, but like her other stuff had been deleted. So cool to see her kind of like return in the role. Ian McElhinney takes on the role of General Dodonna from the original A New Hope. He was like one of the Knights Guard people in the early seasons of Game of Thrones. It's probably the thing most people would recognize him from. Anthony Daniels, of course, making a little cameo there as C-3PO, making him yet again like the only actor that has been in all of these stupid movies. James Earl Jones, of course, returning as Darth Vader. And then a couple cool little cameos from Drew Henley and Angus McInnes as Red Leader and Gold Leader, respectively. And then lastly, of course, Carrie Fisher and Peter Cushing lending their digital likenesses to the film as Leia and Tarkin, respectively. Diving into the trivia here. They have a bad feeling about this. Anybody catch where the line is in this one?
K2SO.
Yep, K2SO starts to say it
up the elevator. Yeah,
and he gets interrupted by Jin and Cassian as a little nod to the long running line in the series. In the galactic timeline of things, the majority of the film, of course, takes place in the year 0 BBY, right in the lead up to the Battle of Yavin. However, the scenes of young Jin, when Galen is taken away, occur in the year 13 BBY. So I have a couple little stats for both of those years. In the year 0 BBY, of course, we also have the liberation of Lothal, which occurs in the Star Wars Rebels series. Sure. Also, Armitage Hux of the sequel trilogy is born in 0 BBY. Also in the year 13 BBY, a young rogue named Han escapes Corellia and enrolls in the Imperial Starfleet, where he is given the surname Solo.
Nope, didn't happen.
We'll talk about that next week.
It did happen.
It definitely did happen.
And so yeah, that is a tease for next week that I wanted to plop in there. Other trivia we have, Gareth Edwards and his creative team discovered some old film canisters while rummaging around the Lucasfilm warehouses. When he asked what they were, an employee said they were old Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope footage. Discovery led to the inclusion of unused Episode 4 material featuring Red Leader and Gold Leader in this movie. So that's how those two kind of made their little return cameo.
It's incredible.
I remember that being just really, really cool in the movie. I remember just having such a giant grin on my face when they popped in. Jin's father, Galen, is modeled after J. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb. Both men share the same guilt factor of becoming an agent of death for building a weapon of mass destruction. Anthony Daniels was jokingly disgruntled that Alan Tudyk was allowed to play K2SO in the relative comfort of a motion capture suit, whereas Daniels had to endure years of discomfort and injuries in the C-3PO costume. Daniels laughingly cursed at Tudyk after Rogue One's premiere. Tudyk later said that a "fuck you" from Daniels was one of the highest compliments he had ever received. So love that little bit of back and forth banter between those guys. Darth Vader's appearance in this film is meticulously patterned after his look in the original Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope. While Vader's chest plate is uncovered in Episode 5 The Empire Strikes Back and Episode 6 Return of the Jedi, his costume initially had his Sith robes draped over his shield, as well as red lenses in the eye holes of the mask. Considering this film takes place mere days before the original New Hope, the costume designers recreated Vader's look down to the last detail. Studio only had 2 choices to play Chirrut, Donnie Yen and Jet Li. Yen was approached first because of his salary of $4 million against Li's $10 million, so, cheap.
Sure, smart.
To gauge his interest, and as a secondary plan, director Gareth Edwards also offered him the other role of Baze. Yen expressed interest in playing Chirrut, but was hesitant in accepting it because it required him to be away from London for 5 months. However, it was his young son's love of the Star Wars films and comics that wore down his reluctance, and it was his idea to make the character blind. When Chirrut, Jin, Cassian, and Baze are being led around with hoods over their heads, Chirrut is, of course, the only one who doesn't stumble. I also love, of course, his like, are you kidding? I'm blind. Like when they put the bag over his head. After Disney's purchase of Lucasfilm, John Knoll, the writer I mentioned previously, heard about some of the early concepts for new Star Wars movies and was not impressed with any of them. So he began developing his idea for this film and started talking it up to his fellow ILM employees, refining the story into a 30-minute pitch. People at ILM liked it so much that he was encouraged to bring it to Kathleen Kennedy, the new president of Lucasfilm. She loved the pitch, and the movie was put into production. Cassian...
Are you guys ready for the sequel?
For Rogue 2?
Yeah, Rogue 2, starring all the Bothans that died for the second film.
I thought about that earlier today, actually, after I finished watching it again.
Yeah, I think it'd be a potentially interesting story. Sure, yeah. It's definitely a thing.
See all the Bothans die.
I remember when this came out, people were like, "Why would we want to see that?" We know Bothans died for this, and everybody, like all the real fans, being like, "Idiots! Those guys died for the second Death Star plans. What are you thinking?" And just like the initial backlash to this is funny, I think, to think about in contrast with the largely positive reception of the film.
It's technically a prequel.
Yeah. I mean,
So people's hesitancy was pretty. They're like, no, don't take us back. Don't take us back if you've taken us forward.
Yeah. Cassian mentions the Guardians of the Whills when speaking with Jin on Jeddah before the attack on the hover tank. The Star Wars from the Journal of the Whills was the original working title of George Lucas's story. The Whills were wise beings who narrated the Star Wars saga to their pupils, explaining it as having happened a long time ago in a galaxy far away. This flashback format was ultimately deemed unnecessary and abandoned. There's consensus among fans that the Whills are the species that Yoda belonged to, but this has never been officially confirmed.
I would like to say, I'll just say on mine at least, I would say there's consensus among some fans, maybe.
I mean,
I
sure.
would certainly not, yeah.
Especially since the Whills have already been confirmed what they are in canon, so...
I mean, now they have. Probably at the time of this, they probably hadn't, or at the time of that trivia thing.
No, at that time they also had been.
I will say that's always been, for me, I mean, this is like, since we're not doing like a Mandalorian thing in this summer Star Wars, that's part of what makes Yoda so cool, is the fact that like you don't know what he is, just like this like almost mythical figure, like there's nothing else really like him, except for the few other characters
except for Yaddle.
Introduced to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yaddle,
now Baby Yoda.
Baby Yoda, right? And like that's what makes them so cool, I think. A little bit like kind of the Joker's back, of like not knowing where this thing came from in any kind of origin.
Yeah,
cool.
I don't remember the character's name, but there was another of that species in the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic game, and I remember you basically get trained by him and some of the other like masters of the Jedi Order from 10,000 years ago or whatever, on Dantooine, and I remember being like, hey, it's like there's your Yoda-like character for this series. Cool.
Yeah.
In earlier versions of the script, Lyra Erso, aka Jin's mom, was a Jedi, hence the Kyber crystal stuff. This was abandoned in later versions as the idea of exploring the lives of the galaxy's normal inhabitants, especially after the fall of the Jedi Order, was considered more interesting.
Oh, hell yeah.
But yeah, I like that there's still kind of a nod or echo of that in her giving Jin the Kyber crystal.
Well, I like that it's clear that like the mom believes, like, I love the idea that they toy with where they introduce the concept and idea that like the Force is a religion to other people. It's not just like this thing that people use as a tool to fight stuff. It's like it is an actual thing that people believe in.
Yeah.
and it's doubled down. Like they pull it in episode 7, as well as 8. But definitely, I love the way that they play it off here, where it's like, it's something that's very spiritual for some of these people. So
I'm curious about everybody's take on this next one, because I think it's really dumb. But when Jin and Cassian are walking through the crowded streets of Jeddah, they bump into 2 guys where one of the men says, "Hey, you just watch yourself." These are Dr. Evazan and Ponda Baba, aka Walrus Man, who were seen in the cantina of Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope, where Obi-Wan Kenobi cuts off Baba's arm after a barroom brawl. The line is lifted directly from that scene. So I remember them popping up and just being like, that's really dumb, because then in the timeline of this, they're basically they have to be on their way to a freighter or something to go straight to Tatooine.
Which is reasonable, I guess, but it's just useless.
Yeah, it's like
I think it's cool. I've always enjoyed it. I think it's just a fun little tip of the hat to that.
I don't.
I'll get into why I think I'll get into this later. The things I don't like about the film.
Yeah.
So.
What was your take on it, Frank? Are you pro Ponda Baba and Dr. Evazan, or being in this movie, or are you against it?
I think I'm a little bit more towards the pro side. Ultimately, I'm kind of in the middle on it, but I don't hate them being there, but I do think you have a great point where it's based on the timeline, then they have to get across the galaxy and try to get to a different bar. They're just
we don't know how close Tatooine is either. So Tatooine could be the next system over.
It just strikes me as so incredibly convenient that they escape Jeddah right before its destruction, and then only to be dismembered a few days later by Obi-Wan Kenobi. Bad luck, I guess, from those guys, or maybe just bad luck follows them around. Anyway, Tarkin, portrayed by Peter Cushing in A New Hope, of course, is now played by Guy Henry, with a CG replica of Cushing's face superimposed over his. As I mentioned earlier, Henry previously played Sherlock Holmes in Young Sherlock, The Mystery of the Manor House during the 1980s, using Cushing's role in Sherlock Holmes from 1964 as his model. So I thought that was another nice little parallel between the actors. And then I have a couple last little fun little tease things here. In one scene at Yavin 4, an announcer can be heard calling out to a General Syndulla. This, of course, refers to Hera Syndulla of Star Wars Rebels. During the assault on Scarif, 2 stormtroopers can be heard referring to the VT-15 going out of commission. This is a parallel to the scene in A New Hope, where 2 stormtroopers are overheard discussing the new VT-16 being quite a thing to see. I don't remember if I said VT-15 first, but...
you did. It's okay.
Yeah. The VT-15 going out of commission in this to make way for the VT-16 in A New Hope is a fun little... nod to continuity of random things stormtroopers talk about. And then, of course, during the final battle, Red 5's X-Wing is shot down and the pilot killed. This call sign would then be reassigned to Luke Skywalker in Episode 4, A New Hope. So I love that it does its part to set up, Luke's spot, the opening for Luke's spot. Lastly, here in trivia, a few little cameos here. Warwick Davis plays Weeteef Cub, one of Saw Gerrera's militia members, continuing his tradition of playing characters that start with W. Rian Johnson, the director of The Last Jedi, plays an Imperial trooper controlling the Death Star's super laser, as do Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, play Destru crew members manning the super laser shaft. They, of course, were set to direct Solo, A Star Wars Story, before being let go for creative differences. And lastly, Gareth Edwards, the director himself, plays the rebel who launches the Tantive 4 into space with the lever in the final scene. We are only a few years removed from this movie, about 5 years removed from the movie. But how do we think it holds up? And what do we think of Star Wars Rogue One, A Star Wars Story? Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. No Star Wars up front. Frank, hit me with your thoughts first.
Yeah, I love this movie. I loved it since the first time I saw it, and I kind of went in not expecting too much. The trailers obviously definitely made it seem kind of cool, but as I kind of mentioned before, at the time I was a little bit more let down by like The Force Awakens, so I wasn't like particularly stoked for, what was going to come next, but I was just blown away like the whole time. Like I think this is an amazing movie, and I might even be a little bit hotter on it than some of y'all, but like even rewatching it the whole time, I'm just like, man, this movie is so incredible, and like it's just beautiful. Love all the different scenes, and I think it's shot so well, and I think it's does such a good job at like mimicking the style of the original Star Wars and just how everything looks and feels and like the vibe and the sets and everything. And ultimately, even with the story, I think the story is like amazing because I know it's really small and simple, but in some ways, but like I think that's what's really cool. And I think especially as we've been watching all these back to back, and I've kind of highlighted like I like some of these smaller stories and some of these more like boots on the ground kind of stories of like people who are getting these kind of tasks and these job done. And that's why I really liked it. I really like this movie. I also will get into kind of our favorite parts in a little bit, but I really like love the fact that this movie actually has like stakes. Like it's a huge thing for me that in modern, or I should just say in media in general, that's like there's just not a ton of stakes all the time, and especially in like Star Wars, especially like some of these new ones, like I don't feel like there's a ton of stakes. Like you don't think like Rey's gonna die, you don't think like Kylo or something. I guess that's a bad example, but like there's just certain people that feel like they have that plot armor. But I really like that in this case, like they make you get really attached to these people, and then you get to like they get ripped away in these like really this like really awesome kind of like third act set piece that is kind of this like baton pass between characters that I really like.
Yeah.
The last thing I just want to throw out too is like I think this is a prequel done right, and that's not even just like against like the Star Wars prequels. I just think in general, like it's like they do such a good job at taking what was there before, expanding on it, making it better, and even some ways it makes like the product like New Hope even stronger in some ways. Not that it even really like needed the help, but like it like makes it even a little bit stronger. And like so I think that's definitely amazing, especially because that's a really hard task, especially with Star Wars.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, going off of one of the things you mentioned there about kind of this having the real, like the look and feel of A New Hope. One of the bits of trivia that I didn't originally pull in, but I will kind of go off of from that is Gareth Edwards instructed the art department to only use elements that would have been available in 1977 to get the movie to look contemporary to Star Wars A New Hope. The flight control animations, for example, had to be kept as simple as possible, resisting the urge to make them too flashy. And I love that seeing a lot of the stuff on the consoles and stuff like that being very, that retro look of, obviously 70s animation or computer graphics and stuff like that. I thought they did a really good job of that, which obviously was very much like missing from the prequels, very much kind of what you're talking on there. Logan, I know Discord's been trying to keep you from talking about this, but here's your chance. Let's like stick it to Discord. Let me know what you thought of Star Wars Rogue One.
Yeah, I think I had talked about the idea that this was kind of one of the movies I was most excited to revisit. When Rogue One originally came out, I watched it and I thought that it was, I had some issues with it. I thought it was good. I really liked the ending, but I thought it was kind of slow to get there. And I didn't love it by any means. And watching it again today, actually, I was quite honestly blown away by the film. And we'll like delve deeper into it down the line. But one of the big things I really want to stress and touch on is throughout doing, at this point, 11 weeks of Star Wars movie podcasts, I think I've kind of come to the idea that Star Wars is a saga, a series about history in some ways, in particular Star Wars' own history, which is ironic because, as we've mentioned numerous times, it's so bad with its history. But the movies are also so obsessed with it. And in particular, the history that matters is the original trilogy. Everything revolves around those three films. And I think that Rogue One, to me, watching it now, is the movie that handles the history the best, right? The prequels don't nail it. The sequel trilogy as a whole doesn't nail it. And I think the two movies that really try in a sort of, they put an actual effort into it, which is 7 and 8, and that people talk about so much in terms of how they reference Star Wars' history and pull things and, you know, the homages and the symbols they use, I think neither one of them is as effective as this movie. It's all the small things, it's all the subtle things, it's the way that it understands that history so well and doesn't seek to, I think, do anything too crazy, but it understands what that history is, and it understands it's all the small things. It's Bail Organa walking in, right, and the musical swell, right, like the way Rogue One incorporates music for character beats and intros, even just like innuendos, right, like Leia's theme early on, kind of getting laid in there. Like the movie's so smart about the history of Star Wars, which is really the history of the 3 films, right, and I think that to me was something I was blown away by again and again and again, right? This is the movie that understands Star Wars history and does it so well. And this is the movie I think sort of tied into that understands kind of what the core central element of the original trilogy is that I feel like the prequels certainly didn't understand. And the sequel trilogy too didn't seem to really get all the way, which is the original trilogy is a series about faith and hope, right? Like those are the 2 big themes of those movies. And so constantly throughout Rogue One, you get the idea that like, this is a group of people who are, you know, living and breathing off of faith in this idea of a rebellion and of a better world and hope, right? As Cam already referenced how the episode began, right? Like rebellions are made of hope, right? And I think that one line is like the entire like ethos of the original trilogy, and the sequel trilogy and prequel trilogy, neither one really got it. And so I loved this movie and how it understood the original trilogy. I was absolutely blown away and surprised at how much I really just like synced up with it. The ending is obviously great and is going to get a lot of talk in this podcast as it rightfully should, because it's phenomenal. But like what they do to get you to that point, I was surprised by how much I loved it this time around.
Mm-hmm. Cameron, hit me with your thoughts on Rogue One.
Man, when I saw this film in theaters, I walked away thinking this might just be my favorite Star Wars film of all time. I've since watched this film several times since it came out. It is one of my most viewed, not viewed Star Wars films, because I watched the original trilogy and even the prequels more times than that.
Many times, yeah.
No, like I would say Rogue One is a film that made me, like, I love Rogue One, but I love Rogue One for like reasons I normally don't love Star Wars. I love Rogue One because it tells a story of regular people trying to do this very, like, quote unquote regular irregular thing, which is they're fighting a war. Like, this is like, you know where the stakes are, because Cassius, did I pronounce that right? Cassian, thank you.
Yep.
Cassian, full on, just like, you can't climb up to get away from the stormtroopers. Okay, don't worry. Shh, calm down. Bang, right in the back. Just cold-blooded, just like, he is a like rebel intelligence. You've seen how cold Imperial intelligence is. Here's the rebellion's version of it. The infighting and the scrappiness of the rebellion gets shown off. The politicking of essentially upper management of the Empire is shown. Darth Vader's like quips and stuff. There's so much about this film that I really enjoy. I think it totally holds up today. It's only 5 years old. It's still shot beautifully. Funny enough, I actually I haven't been able to get the browser extension to work. So I've been watching them on my phone. Well, I got a new phone on Sunday, and it has a very nice screen, and I was incredibly pleased with how gorgeous this film looked on my phone. I know it's not like the way that ideally people watch these films on, but it's what I got, and that's what I did. And man, I loved every moment of it. Like the time I had with it, the only thing I would say, I shouldn't say I loved every moment of it. I loved it. It's great. It's still one of my favorite Star Wars films of all time. Granted, as we'll learn next week, maybe you should never trust my judgment. So we'll see.
Yeah, I was just so as I'm looking back through Twitter on like my own thoughts, because I remember walking out of that movie initially and just like being blown away by the idea that like you said, Frank, I think you nailed a lot of my thoughts on this movie, of like the fact that this movie makes A New Hope a better movie in hindsight, because like it does a thing, it does the prequel thing right, and it does the history thing that you kind of touch on, Logan, right, in that it it recognizes the story that's told in A New Hope, and because it's not beholden to the characters of A New Hope, it can kind of tell its own story, but it can like really hone in on things of like, why did this massive thing have such a seemingly simple flaw to it? And I love that it was a concerted effort by like one of the creators that like you never would have found if you didn't have the plans to the Death Star. If you didn't know what you were looking for, you wouldn't have found it. And I love that they kind of like they canonize that idea, because I remember, prior to this, there were tons of like Family Guy kinds of jokes about that and stuff like that. And this basically like squashes all of that criticism on that. And then, yeah, just the stakes that you kind of touched on there, Frank, like the stakes that we have of this, I feel like there were stories around the time this came out that like an alternate version of the film may exist, or a previous draft might have existed, where some or most of the Rogue One crew did make it out to go do another movie or something like that down the line, another adventure alongside kind of the original trilogy timeline or something. And I love that it doesn't do that. Like I love that it is kind of a like, this is a suicide run. This is that these characters don't get out, and we do get this great baton pass. Like everybody gets their hero moment, even down to like the crew of the ship that like releases the Tantive 5. Like people literally handing off the data to escape Vader and get this out there. That leads us right into A New Hope. I remember being blown away by how well that was executed in the original version. And I remember seeing a lot of criticism kind of at the time around this of the first couple acts of the film. I think even some of us have kind of talked about this in the past, like the first couple acts of the film being a little bit slow in service of setting up that third act. But I think it's because it's having to do all of the legwork of introducing all these characters, and they realize that they only have one movie to do it in. So you have to make these characters matter, and you have to like you have to flesh out these characters enough so that their sacrifices at the end mean something, and so that when the pilot goes down, and when Baze and Chirrut go down, like you feel for those things. When K2SO gets shot and like gunned down, like you feel for each of these characters as they have their last stand to again, we know where those plans end up. We know that there's a happy ending ultimately to this story, but not for this crew. But we wouldn't have that happy ending without the sacrifice of this team. And I love how well that is explored, and I love how it shows us different but new elements to the Star Wars universe. We get obviously the Battle of Scarif and all of the cool ships and like AT-AT variations and stuff like that in that battle. And we get a stronger look at like Crown Force battles compared than we did maybe in anything save maybe like Attack of the Clones / the Clone Wars series or something like that. We see rebel fighters really being guerrilla fighters and stuff that we don't see really again until maybe Last Jedi, I guess, or not Last Jedi, Return of the Jedi. Yeah, Return of the Jedi. But even there, like a lot of that is like played for comedy more than like the brutality of war, because it's cute little stuffed teddy bear guys doing these things, and so like here seeing like people dying on the beaches, and of course the war imagery that evokes. Another one of the trivia things is talking about how they used kind of like footage from Vietnam and Korea and like those more tropical wars to kind of help establish imagery of this film. And I think all of that just plays in well, and really apart from the Dr. Evazan and Ponda Baba like bit, I think this does those fan servicey moments really well. Like I think obviously, of course, we get arguably the best Darth Vader scene we get in anything in the final sequence, because like that is the imposing, intimidating Darth Vader that like we've all built up in our heads, that David Prowse just could never do, because like the physicality of the suit and everything, and just it wasn't available and able to do at the time. So we get to see Darth Vader being brutal and just like merciless, with the rebels in that final hallway scene. And so yeah, it just,
and yet it does not betray who, like, the Darth Vader that we see later on at all.
Right.
It carries it forward so well. It's like, this is like, he is legitimately handicapped in a very physical way, like, in a very legitimate way. And you see the control and power he has in that hallway scene, where he, like, everything he does there is still in line with his lightsaber style that we see in the original trilogy, where it is this minimalistic, masterful, like, this is a master at work, not against another master, and not against another, like, swordsman, or in this case Jedi or lightsaber wielder, but it just the general people. And it immediately brings you back to the reality of, oh yeah, these films are about, like, superpowered space wizards, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like that. The bringing in the archive footage of, as we touched on, like the Red Leader and Gold Leader, like that just being a great, like, visual tie-in to the original series, of course, and making that feel natural and feel seamless. Even though, like, if you think about the lines that you're hearing of, like, watch out for those towers, you can tell it's very clearly like a line that was originally recorded for the trench run of the Death Star and stuff like that. It still works to tie it into this, bringing in characters like Bail Organa and kind of like giving him a send-off when he, has his little moment of I need to return to Alderaan to tell my people there will be no peace. It makes the destruction of Alderaan, like, it cements that, of course, he was there, and of course that's the end of that character's journey. But he trusts this person with his life, and it's Leia leading the message into Obi-Wan Kenobi and stuff is just like it does everything right that the prequels didn't do, because they, like, anytime the prequels introduced a new thing, it contradicted stuff in the original trilogy, whereas like this actively does its best to not contradict what has come before. And I think it nails that so beautifully. And it is probably the best example I can think of a prequel type story enhancing the thing that it is the prequel to. And I don't, like, there's part of me that, like, wonders if there is an element of it that is the immediacy of, like, we see exactly how this ends and how it, like, will tie into, the opening of A New Hope happening, probably hours later or something, when Vader's ship catches up to the Tantive 5, because they clearly don't get too far away before stuff goes down. I love how all of that really, like, plays into another. And I'm certainly, like, I would certainly be curious to see what a variation of this film had looked like if it hadn't been, some people maybe lose their lives, but especially the first time we're watching it, you don't know that it's for sure going to be a suicide run, especially when you have, like, if you follow, like, the news and stuff, and you hear that, like, oh, a lot of these actors are signed to, like, multi-picture deals through Disney and stuff like that. It's like, okay, so they're, like, I mean, in the same way that, like, Quicksilver in Age of Ultron was reportedly signed to a multi-year deal, and then obviously, that didn't pan out. But it's just fascinating to like think of the first time we were watching it, not really knowing how it was going to play out, but then it ultimately feels like it plays out the only way that it could, the only inevitable way. And yeah, I do remember, like, at the time thinking, and often over the years since, thinking, like, how cool it would be if they told a Rogue 2 type story that was, the same thing, or a variation of the same thing with the Bothan spies that, we hear about and knew about going into the second Death Star, and what that was.
Do you guys know what Bothans look like?
I don't, like, I've looked it up in the
Yes.
past, but I don't remember what they are off the top of my head. No.
They are, like, let's just put it this way: a film starring the Bothans would probably utilize the same technology they used for the movie Cats.
Yeah, they're like Wolfman-like people.
Yep,
Yeah.
they're very canine-esque.
Yeah.
Folks.
Yeah.
Known for being very good at spy work and being saboteurs.
I mean, considering how rarely we see them throughout the rest of the series, maybe they were there the whole time, but they're just that good at being spies that
They really are.
they're just there.
They were in the vents the whole time.
Yeah. So yeah, those are my kind of general thoughts on the film. So let's dive into some of our favorite moments of the film. Frank, hit me with one of yours.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I just want to steal like the moment, but I mean, I guess we kind of touched on it already. But Vader at the end, and honestly, you know what? Even to expand on it a bit, like I love before he gets in there when they're just like freaking out, like, and because the door's like locked and won't open, and the other rebels are like running by, and that dude's like banging on the door, and he's like like he's trying to get them to like let them out, or like, and I love that. Then that whole scene where Vader just kind of makes his way in. And from one end of the hallway to the other, and like, I mean, even after that, that's still just incredible. But that's like, I think even some of my favorite part of that, because you really get a sense of fear out of those rebels, and it's honestly like an earned sense of fear. Like everyone should be terrified there.
Yeah,
and that's one of the things I like about Vader, and not only this, and they kind of do the same thing in like Jedi Fallen Order. But I love it's like when he shows up, the objective is to get away. It is not to do anything else. It is just to get away. And in this case, the rebels are just trying to hold him for slightly long enough to get a disc through the door and like into another ship.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
even in the VR game that I mentioned earlier, like the mission once Vader shows up is basically like hold off the other stormtroopers that are around or whatever, as he's just like slowly and menacingly like walking towards you, and then like it gets to a point where it's just like run away. You're like, we know that you don't kill Vader in this moment, so like there's no point in even trying. You random mission spy or whatever is not gonna pull it off here on Mustafar, so get out of here. So yeah, I love that as kind of a running theme of that, and it is very much like, clearly for these rebels, his reputation precedes him, and that reputation ends up immediately earned and paid off in the best way. Anybody else want to chime in on this sequence?
I will. I mean, I already mentioned it earlier. The swords, like the work that he does with the lightsaber, is fitting within his like his very much restrained and masterful kind of strokes that you'd expect from it. But it's the way that he uses the Force in a way that is not replicated or used in any other film. That just shows like it is a matter, like at any moment in the in the original trilogy, Vader could have, up until the very end of Return of the Jedi, taken out anybody else. His like the moment, like in the key moment for me, the critical moment of that scene for me is when he throws away everybody's weapons, and the guy who's nearest to him launches him, has him stay on the ceiling. And just as he's walking past, just kind of like does like a loop-de-loop with his lightsaber and just like cuts through the dude. And it's just like, there's a sense of efficiency and brutality and just total absolute control. And then you can see at the very end as he's watching the cruiser like take off, he goes like when I was watching it, I was like, you can tell he's thinking to myself, maybe I shouldn't have spent so much time just like butchering guys in that hallway. Maybe could have gotten there on time.
Maybe I didn't need to be as flashy as I was. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, but also also I felt like it was a dude who enjoys what he's doing. Like he enjoys his job. It's like I do very few things well, and this is one of them. Like I at the end of the day, I'm still dumb Anakin Skywalker from the prequels. But this thing, murdering these guys, it's as easy as killing younglings.
I got this, and I got pod racing, and that's about all I'm good for.
And like, I can't pod race with my injuries. Are you kidding me?
Exactly. And my limbs, the mechanics just don't work. They don't have the reflexes that I need anymore.
Yeah, there you go. Like, man, I just love it because it's like, oh, cool. We get the real Darth Vader in this moment. Not like it's like, oh, that's right. We forgot. The is not the real Darth Vader. The real Darth Vader is this badass. I love it. We do get dad joke Darth Vader though earlier in the film with the like, don't choke on your ambitions. It's one of the best lines in this film. It's one of my favorite moments as well. Just absolutely, just like that's so like. It's not like it was in A New Hope where he's like, I'm actually gonna try to murder you because you just insulted me and like everything I believe in. I'm going to choke you out in the middle of everybody else to assert my dominance. This time it's like, office prank. Kind of choke you out a little bit. Don't choke on your ambition. Like that turnaround, like that kind of bend over turnaround. Like,
Yeah.
Don't choke on your ambitions.
Aspirations, but yes.
Aspirations, yeah. Don't choke on your aspirations. Ah!
I also
And
love
it's like,
that
perfect.
that like before that we also get like we get a lot of cool little phases of Vader in this. We get like intimidating, threatening with Krennic there, as well as kind of like finding humor in the situation or whatever. But even before that, we get him like in the Bacta tank, showing kind of like,
oh yeah,
you know, what maybe his day to day was a little bit more of than we'd seen probably in the because he is, you know, of course, barely a man anymore. So he is probably spending like most of his time in healing baths when he's not out murdering rebels. So.
Yeah, because he has severe, terrible burns.
Mm-hmm.
So a Bacta tank, and if you can think about it, they probably for the Bacta tank to be like to help out as much as it possibly can, they probably have him like limbless in it, because the way he's floating in it like that, it like he's limbless in it. So it's very clear that he is like, this is like, that's the only time he gets to be like not a machine, and he's in excruciating pain all the time. We already know that, but like it's great. Like I love that. Like it's like every living moment for that guy is pain.
Yeah, I feel like
and deserved.
I feel like it is even a cruel trick that Palpatine is playing on him by like forcing him to like his castle to be on Mustafar, where all that shit went down. Like
I never saw it as being
he can't even escape it. I mean, like that's just my own headcanon. Like what I'm putting at on this. Like obviously, it's a very just intimidating thing that he's got this like castle on this lava planet stuff. But when you think about like the memories that Mustafar has, it's like, would he really want to be there by choice? Like, but anyway, Logan,
I think,
what are your thoughts on kind of Vader and in that last scene, but Vader throughout the film?
Yeah, I mean, speaking more, I mean, I think the scene in particular, but speaking more broadly, even, I mean, I think it is the closest we are likely to ever get to if Star Wars was a horror film, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's really what you're getting in that scene. It is just pure fear and terror, right? It is shot like a horror film, right? Like you can't see Vader, but you hear him first, right? Like a classic monster movie kind of thing. I think that, yeah, I mean, that scene, like people could write a book about it. It is just executed flawlessly. It is so well done. It is the epitome of just terror, and that is sort of my, I think, takeaway from what they're doing with the character in this film, right? Like, you already talked about him in the tank earlier on, where he's just kind of bouncing up and down, but my big thing catching it this time is the attendant he has come into him is afraid to even look up at Vader in the tank. Like, he, like, does a quick glance and, like, looks back down. Like, he's afraid that if he even, like, looks at Vader too long, like, he's the Sun King, right? And, like, the palace, right? Like, he'll get, like, killed for looking at Vader like that. And so that sense of terror just pervades his every move and everything around him, right? Like, to the whole thing in the hallway, right? Like, I think Vader does what he does because he is trying, even though he knows he's gonna kill every single one of his people, to cause them as much terror as possible before he does, right? Like, his thing is to be, again, to be a symbol, right? Like, so much of Rogue One, I think, deals in symbolism and, right, like, the symbols of these particular things, and Vader, to me, is just a walking symbol of terror, right, and fear, and the, like, imperial, I think, horror of it all, right? The horror of what the Empire has become and what he has become, right, from this, you know, whiny kid to now just the epitome of just like ruthlessness. And I think the few scenes we get of Vader are just so well done in that regard, right? Like, he is someone who, I think, to a point Cameron made earlier, totally enjoys what he's doing in that scene, right? Like, there's no sort of anything, right? And like, it's interesting too, because this is the last few hours, right? Last day maybe, before Vader is going to be permanently altered as a character, right? With Obi-Wan coming back, and then him not knowing, but sensing this new presence was Luke's appearance, right? Not knowing what it is yet, but like knowing something new has happened, and Obi-Wan obviously walking back into his life after 20 years, like, Vader will be like altered and going a new path from that point onwards by the end of A New Hope. And so like, this is the last time where like Vader is just pure darkness, right? And pure just a killing machine. And so it is kind of spectacular to watch, right? And I know we've already touched on it, but for me, it's not even like the lightsaber maneuvers he's doing. It is the fact that, yeah, like, he's not rushing in here, right? He is just slowly walking towards him like an executioner to the gallows, right? And he is moving as someone who has literally no limbs, because he doesn't, right? And he is have like a labored breathing, but he almost turns those weaknesses into strengths by utilizing them to kind of move slower and more methodical and allow that fear and allow that terror to build up. Like, I think it's just such a well done scene, and I think it feeds so much into Vader as like a psychological warfare figure just as much as an actual like I'm just gonna kill you figure. I think it's fantastic, obviously.
Yeah. Any other favorite moments people want to give a shout out to? Camet, you got any?
Oh yeah, plenty of favorite moments. Yes. Anything having to do with KS is awesome.
Agreed.
I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the film, towards the podcast, the Cassian Andor stuff, where in the alley, anything he has to do where he's like
a bad guy,
like a bad guy. Yeah, anything here, he's like, don't, it's okay. Like, I remember being in the theater watching that for the first time and being like, okay, he's gonna calm him down, and then like you hear the blaster and you go, oh,
yeah,
it's like this. I'm like, okay, all right, I'm with you, dude. I'm with you. And then when he takes his gun with him to go like to basically snipe, Jin's dad, like Chaos is just like, well, he did have his rifle and sniper configuration.
Yeah.
And it's just perfect. And like, but also like that moment, I love it because other film directors and stuff would have it be like a focus, like like this deep breathing, like, can I do this? Can I shoot this guy that I don't want to actually kill? And they don't do that. They're like, this guy is a hardened killer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even that he's perfect. His breathing is stilled, perfect. He's focused. He has the shot. And instead of focusing on his face, it focuses on his hand.
Mm-hmm.
Touching the trigger and like in the moment making that decision, no. And like moving his hand off the trigger is for me way more impactful if we had gotten some like atypical sniper footage like stuff. Like the fact that they shot it that way, I felt like distinguishes actual, like, he didn't panic. He didn't like have second thoughts. He made a conscientious decision to follow his original order and not his actual order that he was given afterwards, which also intelligence head breaking rank from the council to give the order to actually kill and then getting called out for it later. And then like being like, can't trust this girl. It's like, oh dude, I like always knew you were kind of a dick in the like man, what an absolute prick.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. This movie does a great job of showing that like the rebels also had their own like bad guys within the rebellion, as you're gonna get, and like part of that is set up with, of course, with like the dichotomy between like the Rebel Alliance we know and Saw Gerrera's like splinter group stuff, and then you get more of it with that guy. I when you mentioned the moment where he basically like shoots his own like informant, like it dawns on me that one moment gives Cassian more characterization than like a lot of the characters in the sequel trilogy get throughout the entire thing.
Oh yeah,
100%. In retrospect, and that's just like an incredibly like powerful decision that feels so like foreign to what we're used to in seeing in Star Wars. Like it in I think the best possible way. So yeah, I love that moment as well.
It sets him up. It sets him up that this is an actual spy.
Yeah,
like this is a rebel spy, and I don't mean rebel within the context of Star Wars. I mean in general, just the idea of somebody who is an open rebellion, acting as a spy. Also, the fact that like he and everybody else just has completely different kind of clothing that is just not typical. Like it fits Star Wars, but it's not super typical Star Wars. His blue coat that he has throughout the entire film is just like like I love that up until like there's Logan said, there's tons of symbology in this film, and it's great and fantastic. But yeah, it's like I just love anything really where Cassian, KS, and Jin, especially when Jin shoots the KS bot and he
yeah, K2SO is
sorry, K2SO. I always call him KS because anyway, because it's Keith.
Yeah. But yes, that moment is certainly a highlight of like, you knew that wasn't me, right? It's like you clearly see from her face she did not. Like she realizes after the fact, oh shoot, did I just kill like our ally? Oops.
Oh no, my favorite thing was like when she gives this when they give this impassioned speech about like we're gonna break rank, we're gonna go and get the plans, and K2SO is just there and he goes, Jin, I'm going to come with you. Pause. Because Cassian said I had to.
Yeah.
And then turns around and walks away. To me is one of the like best like humorous scenes in all of Star Wars. Just that moment of like, because I was told I had to. And then like turns and walks away. And it's just like this droid is like, he is equal parts like kind of like nasty and rebellious as he is I will follow orders, in just like a very great like kind of balance between the two of like this is like an actual like true neutral edging towards chaotic neutral type character.
Yeah, it's very clear that the people who wrote for K2SO love HK-47 from Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic.
100%.
He definitely doesn't go full meatbag, but he is clearly a very different kind of droid than C-3PO. In the best possible ways. I love K2SO. Absolutely.
Yep. You're going to give her a gun. You want to know the probability of her shooting you with that gun? It's not good.
It's high.
It's high.
Yes.
It's high. Very high.
Yeah.
Like, just perfect. You're going to let her keep it.
Yeah.
Like, just like he's the perfect, like, I'm just going to say it. He is the perfect, like, sassy friend character in this film.
Yeah.
Which is just like gives it a sense of levity and brevity that I think it just needs in moments.
Yeah. Logan, any favorite moments you want to give some love to and give a highlight to?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, obviously I'd be remiss with the trio of characters Cameron just said are all great, and I think Jin in particular, I find as a really compelling and interesting kind of central protagonist to kind of pin the story on. For me, a lot of my favorite moments, again, go back to, I think, ones that reference the idea of just how this movie deals with history and how the movie deals with its kind of theme of faith and hope, right? The idea that we're using the Force, which from its very first utterance has kind of been called like a religion, right? And a faith, like this old crackpots still practice out in the desert kind of thing. And we're seeing that really amplified here, right? Like the Force is a faith, right? And it is something that binds everyone together, whether they are Jedi or not, right? And I think seeing the people who, are the guardians of this Jedi temple, are the guardians of this thing, who are very clearly Force sensitive to some degree, but not to the scale of like a Jedi, and using that as kind of this mantra, right? Their kind of rosary that they say every day, I found super interesting, right? Like that whole aspect is one of my favorite through lines of the movie. I think the scene of, him walking to the console to turn on like the connector relay, whatever sci-fi bullshit they came up with.
The master switch. It was way simpler than that. It was just the master switch. Yeah.
Yeah. To send up the signal, like that whole walk of him just like saying it again and again and again, just like all the bullets like flying past him, is one of the coolest scenes I think in the entire movie, if not almost any Star Wars movie. It's so well done, and I think it captures so much of the kind of mystical and spiritual elements of the Force that, again, the prequels and the sequel trilogy just don't even care about. Like weirdly enough, like it's so interesting watching Rogue One, because it's so interesting to then think back on what we've seen now and been like, man, the prequels and sequel trilogy just did not get so much of what made the original trilogy special. Like even the sequel trilogy movies I like or think are interesting, I like and interesting for like not what I like about the original trilogy. Like they just like they don't get it in the same way I think, and like Rogue One very much gets what makes those movies special in terms of like the mysticism of it and like the spirituality of it and kind of the grunginess of it all and this ragtag group going against this Imperial force, and this idea of like preserving history, right, and like what is important about history, right. They're like the prequels and sequels weirdly like undo, and they're like fervent desire to be as like, you know, obedient to the original trilogy as possible. They end up just like making it worse in some ways. And this one stays true to it and understands the spirit of it, and in that, but doesn't like, I think, feel it has to like kind of be like always like obedient to it, and in doing that it makes the original trilogy stronger as a whole, and not weaker. And so like I find that so interesting. I wrote them down. I find the idea that like, you know, I think as we'll see in Solo, there are times where like spur of the moment coming up with a name for something can go awry.
Yes.
But like here I think it works really well. I like that whole sequence. I like the political dynamics of the rebellion. I like getting the look of the rebellion here, right? Because like this is in some ways, this is actually kind of the darkest hours of the rebellion and not Empire Strikes Back. Because by then at least they've had that victory. By then they have Han and Leia and Luke all there, right? They've had victories. They've experienced something. And this is before they've had any real huge victory like they're about to have just a day or two from now, right? This is before the people who will define the rebellion and the Galactic Civil War are on board, really, in any way, other than like Leia.
I mean, they quite literally don't have hope, like throughout.
Yeah, right, and like that's kind of the
movie.
key, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that is something that, again, that's why I kind of have made it one of my big kind of themes for the movie. That like the idea of hope is obviously found in like every Star Wars movie, basically, and all of it basically ties back into, or so often ties back into, like Luke is that new hope, that kind of that new spark into the galaxy that they reference in Revenge of the Sith, and they reference in the sequel trilogy where like he literally gets to be the new hope again. And so to see like this is basically right before the curtains are kind of pulled back onto what will define the entire saga, or those three films, is really interesting, right? Like Frank said, this is a prequel done well because it shows you, I think, like, you know where the story is going to go, but it shows you what it was like right before it happened. And it's a really interesting look at that, right? Like how fractured the rebellion is in some ways, how many of them want to kind of give up, how, you know, Jyn gives this really one of the best like stern speeches of the Star Wars series, and she gets maybe a 50% approval rating on it, right? Mm-hmm. Right, the fact that you see the fact that the rebellion has to be like apparently unanimous voted up things, which is a terrible system of government, and one that they seem to do away with pretty quickly in the other original trilogy movies. I think it's so interesting to see the seeds that are planted, right? Like I like the gold looter and red looter things because, and that whole battle sequence in space, because it shows you how they're already depleted by the time to get to the Battle of Yavin. So when that happens, they are literally throwing everything in the kitchen sink at this because they've already had those losses sustained, right? And I think that is what makes it so interesting. And like we've talked about, that's what makes the Battle of Yavin so much more tense, is the fact that, you know, this literally is it. Like this is all they have left. And they've already sacrificed so much to get to that point, and they will sacrifice so much more in that battle, because that battle is a bloodbath for both sides, I guess, to be fair. But yeah, like it makes it so much better, right? Like it adds those stakes to A New Hope retroactively, right? It makes that whole crazy movie's journey seem even crazier, right? Because you have like fucking the suicide mission to get to the planet, to then get the plans, to beam them up to the space, for then the space station to get them, for them to transmit them to somewhere else as they go down, for then the guards, for like the carrier, like soldiers, to run through like ship as they're getting massacred by Vader, have a door jammed on them, trade off to another soldier who then gets like shot at, falls down, stumbles, is like crawling on his like bare legs basically to get it off onto the ship, to blast off onto the like to that, and then A New Hope happens, right? And that gets captured, that gets sent on to Tatooine. Like everything about it makes it even more insane and frantic and frenzied, and like it really does, I think, add on to the sense of urgency of like they're never given a moment to breathe, and it all happens in such a condensed time period. And I think we obviously love New Hope on this podcast because we've ranted and raved about it extensively. It's Cameron's favorite Star Wars movie. It is a phenomenal film, and the ability for this movie to make that better, which is seemingly like an impossible task, and they do it in such a brilliant fashion. Like, I just constantly find myself marveling at what this movie was able to do with the source material and in elevating the things around them. And it is, prequels, I say a lot, are in some ways a thankless task. There's one of the hardest things to nail, I think, as a prequel. There's so much built-in expectations. You know how it's gonna like theoretically like end already. It is one of the hardest stories to do, and especially a hard one to do really well. And not only is this a example of a prequel that does it well, this is to me like the example of a prequel done well, along with like The Godfather Part 2. And even that, a prequel is only half of that movie, right? Like it gets kind of that out too, right? So this is like the example of like, this is how you do a prequel, and respect the source material with a series that is maybe the biggest in the entire world in Star Wars. And the fact they pull it off is, I think, an incredible accomplishment.
Yeah. Agreed with really all of that. One favorite thing I want to highlight, because I imagine it seems like one thing that like often just doesn't get praised about this movie, given like all the other things that are worth praising. But I, especially in this last rewatch, I love how much time we spend with and how we see like Krennic versus Tarkin, and we see like that, like the machinations of Tarkin. And I stand by this. I remember seeing this. I saw it like obviously opening night, myself, or maybe with Cameron. I don't remember. But I remember seeing it opening night. But then I went and saw it a couple weeks later with like my family after Christmas, like I think for my dad's birthday, basically. And I remember seeing it with them, who nobody else in my family like follows movies and stuff like that as well as I do. So I remember them talking about how like cool Tarkin looked, and how they didn't realize it was like a CG face and stuff. Like I stand by the idea that like if you know to look for like CG and stuff like that, sometimes you're gonna find it, even if you like wouldn't have otherwise seen it. Like I think of that, like I remember first time I saw like the Justice League, like not knowing like which scenes were the ones where they had to like remove Superman's face or like mustache, but like everybody else was like, oh my god, it's like so apparent and stuff. And so maybe it's just like my eyes aren't like that attuned to that kind of stuff.
That's a great example. Yeah.
The thing about that is like not every frame is perfect. So if you're watching every frame closely, looking for these imperfections, you will find them, because it's impossible to make it look perfect every frame. But if you just watch it passively, just enjoying what you're seeing in front of you, most of the time that'll pass just totally normal.
Yeah, and I think Tarkin looks really good in this, and I think
I agree.
Like my family basically was like, they thought like there was like a moment where they were like, I mean, how is that guy still alive? Like he was from the original movie 40 years ago, and it wasn't until I kind of explained after the fact, oh, they kind of digitally imposed his face and created him through CGI and stuff, and they were like, oh, I just thought it was an actor in makeup and stuff like that. And I think that's a testament to, the performance that we get from him, but then also just like what a stark character Tarkin is. And I think like this movie, like love that CGI or hate it, like this movie would have felt like it had a Tarkin shaped hole if he wasn't there, and if it was just like Krennic. So I love that like it explains like why we don't know who Krennic is and stuff like that, obviously given like where he ends. But I love that it is like Tarkin kind of steps in now that this thing is like proven itself and takes credit for it, and then continues on, and his hubris obviously leads to his own downfall in A New Hope and all that stuff. And there's even a one of the trivia things that was basically like there are empty seats like around the table of like admirals with like Moff Tarkin and Vader in A New Hope, and like there's an idea that like one of those was supposed to be for Krennic, and now like that's kind of like retroactively put in there, and so I love little things like that. But really it is like extraordinary villain performances from
Mhm.
like building on obviously the great work that Peter Cushing put into that character 40 years
Mhm.
ago, and Guy Henry does a great job kind of like continuing that legacy on. But then again, Ben
100%.
Mendelsohn is phenomenal as Krennic, and like milks all that stuff for all it's worth. And I love that like he is on a mission to like plug the leak basically, and he can't do it,
Mhm.
and even that ultimately leads to his downfall. So like that's one of my favorite elements of this, that like I feel like we spend more time with the Imperial side of things in this than we really do throughout probably the rest of the original trilogy. Like we get a couple scenes here and there, but I feel like we get the most time with like that class of characters in this film. And again, as a one-off kind of thing, I think that does a great service to like not only to like immediately introduce these characters. I mean, like the Ben Mendelsohn's introduction of like like feigning sadness at the lie that that Galen's wife has passed or whatever, and then immediately being like, oh, praise be, she's back from the dead. When she comes for his
Oh,
life.
there's Lena back from the dead.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Like I love how he's just like unforgiving. He's there to get Galen, and he's not going to really take any of Galen's like phony lies or whatever. And it's just a great introduction to that character that we just get more and more greatness from throughout the film. So that's an element that I love about this. Obviously, like all of the other things you guys have kind of highlighted, I stand by as well. But that's one I think that often, like, maybe it's because we're just so accustomed to villains being like poorly drawn and whatnot, within Star Wars, without Star Wars, like all of that when they are, handled like this, I think it stands out for me a little bit more, especially because as a actor in a past life, I always stood by the idea that like the villains are the most fun to play because
100%.
they get the highest of highs and then they lose, in most stories. And so like they get to play a wide range of like just the spectrum of getting to sink their teeth into a character, which is way more fun than just like, I'm gonna be the hero, so I have to be like good all the time and stuff like that. And these guys, I mean Krennic especially, like is the hero in his own story. He is out there to put down this rebellion because he thinks the Empire is worth what it's doing for the universe and stuff like that, or the galaxy. And yeah, I really love kind of the interplay that we get across all of them. And then also like just seeing, because obviously like A New Hope being shot in a very different style of the 70s and stuff, like seeing the imposing figure that Tarkin is because he's a tall guy, and it basically goes toe to toe with Vader, who is also a tall figure in the original series, but we don't get like a lot in the way of like full body shots that we do get in this. So like seeing him tower above Krennic and be an imposing force is just another like, oh god, yeah, like I get why people would be afraid of Tarkin like they are, and why why he is at an equal level with Vader in A New Hope. Like that is, I think, really excellently kind of like also conveyed in this film, in a way that maybe it wasn't as much sometimes in A New Hope. I think this like reinforces again like another element of A New Hope that just is made better because of this movie. So wanted to give some love to that.
Oh, I want to give also love to that as well, because there's something very special that they do, and I don't know how they did it, but you can see Tarkin put so much together in the moment when Jeddah is destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
Like he just pieces so many things together in that moment that when he like lays the blow that he's taking control, you can tell that he like, it wasn't like, oh, this is a like long machinated plan that I've had. Ha ha ha. It's in a single moment, he's immediately pieced together. This is too powerful to leave in just anybody's hands. It needs to be in my hands. How do I do that? Where does my authority slip in? Okay, I have my plan. By the time it's over, outside of that single moment where those pieces come together, he immediately has his plan to going forward, and he nails it. Response, crisp, well, like I'm in charge. Like I'm in charge. Well, you're being relieved because of the pilot. Like also, by the way, you should and like immediately picks up exactly. There's probably still a leak. People probably know about this. Find out how it happened and find out if we have any holes to fix. Which is just absolutely fantastic. Just in a single moment, I feel like it pieces that together, and it's just really great. This film work, possibly special effects work as well. But also just like I think that it stands like the Tarkin like CGI on top of it is great. I do not like the one with Carrie Fisher.
Yeah, Leia feels a little bit
agree.
weaker
I agree.
in the limited bit we get with her.
I think part of it is also we've just recently rewatched films where she's older.
Yeah.
And so like but also there's just something to Tarkin. You could see like the wrinkles and like the texture to his face. Carrie Fisher's I felt was too smooth.
I mean, I think
it felt too much like a 3D model than like an actual person's face.
I mean, I think the amount of screen time that each get reflectively, you know, was absolutely like a figuring into how much work is put into each of them. So,
sure.
You know, like the Princess Leia didn't probably get as much, you know, rendering time and design time because it's, you know, the last, you know, 5 seconds of the film or whatever. And they were like, yeah, how much time and money and manpower do we really need to put into that versus like the payoff of that moment in the film. So like I get
100%.
why it doesn't look as crisp.
As do I.
But yeah, it doesn't like it doesn't bother me as much, but it does, I think, highlight then how good Tarkin looks in comparison.
Is, yeah.
Yeah. That's
what I was trying to say also is like with how like if you were to tell me, oh, they CGI'd somebody's face on top and I saw Leia, I was like, okay, I see it. I expect it. You show me Tarkin's, I'm going to be like, I don't see that. What are you talking? Like, that looks fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So like those, and I think that's the stark comparison for me is like, I can point to these two things here and say one is distinctly better than the other. Granted, all things considered with it, for sure.
Any other favorite moments anybody wants to give some love to, or do we want to slip into like a few of the like, maybe this didn't really work for me kind of things?
All the action, I want to give a shout out to all the action. Whether it's the like the guerrilla fighting scene on Jeddah, whether it's the space fighting, whether it's the when the Rebel Alliance is doing the bombing run on the base,
mm-hmm.
and it's not even like a really strong action scene. There's just so much happening around them.
Yeah.
And love all that.
Chirrut gets a really cool moment in there where he basically like uses a bow and arrow effectively to take down a TIE fighter.
Perfect, like amazing. It's like, of course, yep, okay, yep. This guy's super. Like this guy's really your ace in the hole.
Yeah.
But also like they never overplay. Like nobody ever gets like shined too much. It's very realistic, very down to earth combat as far as, you know, people get shot. They like Cassian Andor, perfect example. Like is shot in the like upper chest and like deals with it
mm-hmm.
for the rest of the time in the film. Like he is significant. Also, and he takes like a fall down a couple of ladder rungs.
Yeah.
Like people carry the weight of their damage in this film in a very good way. So you never lose like these are regular people type feeling. But also like just anything, whether it's the beach fighting, the like when Jyn is up on top of the satellite and there's the space battle going like an upper atmosphere battle going on around her.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's incredibly cool and awesome.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
there's just really great action.
The excitement that the guerrilla fighters get when the Blue Squadron kind of breaks through and you know is able to kind of take out some stuff. Like I mean, seeing those X-wing kind of come in and take out AT-ATs and stuff like that, it was just like really cool. Absolutely, I agree with that.
Also, like the full on like Vietnam helicarrier drop in, to take like drop off troops and like the Wookiee, right? The Wookiee on the gun.
I don't
or
think
it was something else on it.
It was some other guy. It was one of the like the smaller like Ugnaught type characters or something. It's not an Ugnaught, but it's Ugnaught like.
He made a Wookiee like sound, which is why I'm like, was that a Wookiee?
I remember him like in the trailers and stuff being like, oh, that guy's interesting looking.
Yeah. But the way he's coming in, like just like a Vietnam helicopter pilot coming in, it's like perfect. I love just all the action, whether it's like Jeddah and Scarif blowing up, whether it like just everything as far as it comes to action and planning that out. is, in my opinion, picture perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Gareth Edwards did such a fantastic job on that. So.
Also, shout out to the Chirrut like introduction fight where he like
100%.
comes in and as a blind man takes out a handful of stormtroopers and stuff. They're kind of all dumb for not like for going into hand-to-hand combat when they have blasters, but whatever. Like, hey, stormtroopers aren't the best trained. Frank, you were gonna hop in with something.
Yeah. I have one more quick thing that I do love, because like I love this whole movie, and I think we covered so much of like what does make it great. But one small thing, and it is just a small thing, but I noticed it this time and I really liked it, is I love that the shot or kind of that scene when some of the ships go to escape and like or not the Death Star, but like that
Star
battle.
Destroyer.
Yeah, the Star Destroyer warps in and they like slam into each other.
Mm-hmm.
And like obviously the Star Destroyer is like fine, but like that's another one of those moments, kind of almost like that Last Jedi moment, where like nobody's ever done that before, like at least from what I remember. So I was like, that's so cool to see like some get away, and then that one part in particular just kind of blows up against the side and like falls off, and like that's a really cool moment that I like.
Yeah.
Speaking of that same kind of thing, it's like bringing the Hammerhead Corvette.
Yeah.
Hammerhead. It's like you've always wondered, like, why does it have that big hammerhead type thing? Is it just the name of the ship or whatnot? And it's like, no, this thing is a battering ram. Slams into that like Star Destroyer, takes out 3 of them by like just like using the gravitational force of the planet itself to accelerate the pieces down, and then blowing that thing up is fantastic. Oh my gosh! Also, I forgot to say, shout out to Mads Mikkelsen. He's phenomenal. Every scene he's in is beautiful and wonderful. You can like especially his goodbye to Jin, because his final line is, "I have so much to tell you."
Yeah.
And then he dies, and it's just like heartbreaking. When he's with her when she's little, with his wife, and he's like begging her to put down the blaster. He goes, "Don't do it. Like, put it down." And she does it anyway because she knows that she'll just be used to hurt him in the future. And like the dichotomy between Crenshaw and, did I say Crenshaw?
Krennic.
Anyway, Krennic and Urso is so good, because it's just like this, like when he goes, you are the brightest mind, like the work is, he just says it like the work has stalled, like so good. Not like we're working on the Death Star, the work has stalled. Like, you know what I'm here for, you know what I'm here to talk to you about. Like, it's stalled. Come back.
I love that other line he has too, where he's like, "We were on the verge of greatness."
That little like this. Oh, so good. Also, the way that like Mikkelsen is just like, like perfectly hamming it up with him in just like the best ways, and you're only a couple minutes into the film. It just really sets this tone that this is going to be a phenomenal film. Also, beautifully directed and shot cinematography throughout this entire film. Beautiful. So,
I want to throw to you, Logan, but one real quick insert I want to throw in there, talking about the I think it's probably like the executor or whatever it is, like whatever Vader's Star Destroyer is when that comes in. There's another great moment. Like, I love, because I feel like this was like the first time we saw this, or at least it's like it definitely stood out to me. But seeing like the Star Destroyer over Jeddah, just like in orbit, since we so often just see those things out out in space, like seeing them there as an imposing force, as a as a dominant kind of like threat to that city, I think was a real cool another real cool image of this film. But Logan, any final things on from your notes that you wanted to give some love to or prod at?
Yeah, I mean, like, Forrest Whitaker is great, I think, in his role. I think Saul is a super interesting character, and I think that, again, this movie just does really interesting things. It's kind of all of the toys it has in its toy box, and I think the Rebellion and Rebel Alliance get in such a kind of in-depth look, especially what it is before it kind of becomes more unified and kind of solidifies a bit more into what we know it as going forward. Like, this is very much the Rebel Alliance when it is like just stopping to become like a bit of a Wild West organization, and it's starting to actually like be put together. And so seeing this more like extremist side of the rebellion and the guy who's clearly just kind of lost it a little bit, and it's just kind of hanging on. Speaking of Anakin only being like a chest and no limbs, like, this guy's basically just hanging on for dear life at this point. I love the fact that his oxygen tank deliberately sounds very reminiscent of Vader's. Especially like the first time he uses it is in a very like shocking, like, oh shit, that's Vader's sound. I think he's rad, right? Like he is this completely unhinged character who's lost it, but is, using air quotes, like doing it for the right reasons kind of thing. Right? And it kind of, again, this movie kind of questions why they're doing what they're doing multiple different times. And I think his characters arc in terms of why he's doing what he's doing and is it worth it, right? And what is he even fighting for at a certain point in time now? He's kind of gotten like so far into, he's too deep that he doesn't even know kind of what he's fighting against at a certain point. I loved his character. I think his interaction with Jin is super sad and really tragic, and just how that bond has been broken. And I think kind of the Triforce of him, Galen, and Jin, and that kind of those relationships all formed together are really sad, right? Where Saw and Jin are have each mourned for Galen and what they've lost with that character. And then they've each kind of mourned for, certainly Saw has mourned for Jin, even if she has maybe thought he just kind of left her there. And so for him to then be like, are you here to kill me? Delivered in such a tragic, heartbreaking way.
Shakespearean.
I love
almost.
I love that whole dynamic, right? And like this movie ends with just them all gone, right? Like they all die within like 12 hours of each other, basically. I thought was just so beautiful, right? Like I think Galen is great and super, like this movie is sad, and that shouldn't be missed either, right? Like it ends on a happy note, but it is an incredible toll to get there, right? And essentially every character that we meet is dead by the end of this movie, and that shouldn't be missed either. Like it's just the cast is just wiped out basically, and I think that's just a really interesting movie idea and story idea, let alone a Star Wars idea of kind of incorporated that into it. And I think that sense of loss and sadness and tragedy kind of pervades this whole movie in a way where, I think we get like flickers of that in like Empire and Return of the Jedi. I think that we get not really any flickers of it in the prequel trilogy. I think they don't really handle it well. Maybe parts of Revenge of the Sith. Honestly, like the closest thing to this movie is Order 66, probably. And him just like that feeling of like we're just losing everything and everyone's going down. And I think that's arguably the best part, certainly one of the best parts of Revenge of the Sith. And I think that sense of loss is so laid heavy over here, right? And like, especially when you get to, why Cassian is fighting, right? And you're not the one who's lost anything, right? And like, I've been in this fight since I was 6, right? I think was delivered so well, right? And you get the sense of like, he's essentially a child soldier who's grown up, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why he's hard, and that's why he's rough around the edges. It's because he has known no other world, right? Like, these are the consequences of the Empire's actions, is that they're turning a generation of kids against him, and also sort of breaking those kids, that when they do grow older, they're not whole in their own way. I think this movie is just, I think it's great.
Great. Anybody want to find poke any holes at the movie? I know Logan or Cameron, you said you had some things that you weren't the biggest fan of, so hit me with yours, and maybe we'll all be like, you're an idiot.
Laborious. This film is laborious at times. It is a long
laborious.
film. It take
really?
Here. There's like, I liked Frank when Frank's like, it's such a simple story. I was like, on paper, but it takes a long time to get through. And like this is not necessarily even something bad about it. It's just like, by the time you get to Scarif, we got to Scarif and I was like, okay, cool. How much more time do I have on the film? And I checked because I got up to go to the bathroom, and I check it, and it's like, oh, I have almost an hour left of this film. Like, it is a long film. It goes places. Now, don't get me wrong. They do a lot of stuff. It is chock full of stuff happening. Mm-hmm. And it takes you along for the ride. But like the part of Scarif like being such a massive chunk was real heavy for me towards the end, because I was just like I was like the circumstances I was watching in, let's just say today was a hard day. Like it is a film that I think is like long, but I would call this a war film. Like this feels like a heavy, long war film. People, you ask what kind of films I'm talking about. I'm talking about films like Platoon. I'm talking about films like Saving Private Ryan. If this was on a VHS, like I would expect to be buying a $60 VHS box set to watch this film all on like 2 to 3 different tapes. That's the kind of film I'm talking about. Like this film is, and that's great. It does a lot with that. But if I was to say there's one thing like that I would say that is not bad about it, but just like that I like by the time, because I saw that time on Scarif and I was like, what happens there? And I'm like, okay, they do all of this, but then I remember, oh wait, because each scene takes time, because they really lay into the realism of it. We gotta find the master switch. Which when I heard it this time, at the time in theaters, I was like, yeah, find that master switch. This time I was like, master switch? Like, guys, like,
I mean, like,
it's cool. It's cool. Brody doesn't do anything anymore. He just like does stuff. He doesn't have to like we don't have to have like this big long take this out and do this and like stuff. And it's like, okay, but I mean, we're here. I'm here for it. I'm there for it. But like it does this entire thing to give. And here's the thing: it gives everybody their moment, right? Yeah. Right before they die. Gives everybody their moment before they die, which is awesome. Good for narrative and story and character purposes. Yes, on my time and how where the circumstances of me watching it. No,
I mean it is definitely like the climax of Back to the Future of like we got to connect the thing to the clock tower, like stretched out over 7 different characters basically. But like I love that. I mean, like Frank described it earlier, and I was going to come in with basically the same thing. It is the baton pass. The whole movie is the baton pass of this information from Galen to Bodhi to Saw to Jin to like the rest of that crew, and then like getting that information. Everybody has their piece of the puzzle they need to like complete. Even the guys on the beach, the spies and saboteurs that volunteered for this mission, like all of them like fulfill that purpose and do their part to help lead this. So like everybody's sacrifice is felt, and that's like I love. We didn't really dive into it too much, but like when Logan mentioned the idea earlier, like the idea that this spawns effectively what becomes Rogue Squadron, and we get kind of this idea that Rogue Squadron is now in honor of this crew and the sacrifice they made is a beautiful like retconning kind of creation, even if like I immediately now think of it as a little clunky because it feels so much like the Solo moment of like let's give the name of the movie like it there are some fun parallels between those two sequences, but I love that everybody gets their moment in there, and that it does it doesn't feel laborious to me. It like, and I would be curious like if you didn't watch these movies in between breaks at work or whatever, and like you just kind of sat down to enjoy it, if you would have thought if laborious is the word that comes to mind there as well. But
sure, like here's the thing, like that's kind of the shtick of it is like I watched this film actually probably more put together than the rest of them that I've watched for this rewatch, just because like this is one of the easier films just to kind of like have on but also like the job I'm doing now is very different from the job I was previously doing, so there's different things about it, but I will say that when I say laborious, like I just mean it just takes a long time to get to where it's going, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It has a lot of things to do to get to where it's going to go. Yeah. Like that's just, and so if I'm saying that's the bad thing, that tells you how good this movie is. That tells you just like how really great it is. Like it is a great film. Yeah. It's like we sing its praises for an hour and 49 minutes. And we're an hour and 59 minutes in. So sorry, we were saying its praises for an hour and 55 minutes. Yeah. And I've had a couple minutes to say it was like really long.
Yeah. It's
that's it.
It's definitely an interesting, cause like thinking of it in that context, especially of the baton pass, it's almost, a polar opposite, yet like the, flip side of the coin to kind of what we talked about a lot with Rise of Skywalker, in that like that movie is going from point A to point B and like is trying to move at such a pace that you're not thinking about how none of this makes sense. Whereas this one, like, because it's stretched out at like it isn't hindered or hurt by the idea of like thinking about each of these moments, and it lets you live in each of these moments again, I think, to make those final moments especially pay off. Like the
100%,
setup in Act 1 and Act 2 like does nothing but benefit Act 3 of this film compared to Rise of Skywalker, where like it is the same, like, hey, we're going from thing to thing to thing to like get this thing to here to get to there, and it just like it's a very weird like parallel, I guess, between those two movies, but just how much better this one handles it, I think.
Well, I think a big part of that is also like this film is long, not because it's moving so fast that it wants you to not pay attention to anything. This film is going at its pace, which is much slower, but at the same time, it's taking its time so that you do look at things and notice things, and like you are living in the moment of this film. Fantastic. I love that about this film. It just so happens that if there's one bad, like somewhat negative thing I could say about it that also is actually a positive about it, here we go, like a backdoor compliment to the film, is that it is very long. And I always say laborious. I don't mean it as in the regular context where you say that like, oh, I can't believe I had to go through all that. This does tell a story of a labor. This is it's a labor of love. It's a labor of like, I wouldn't say it's a roaring good time because it's literally a war movie. It's very sad.
Yeah.
But another, like I said before, this is the kind of movie that you'd expect to be, if you were watching this on VHS tapes, this would be a 2 to 3 VHS tape long movie. And I'm sitting down for that, but I got to take the time aside to sit down for that. I'm not watching Saving Private Ryan, even though I got somewhere to be in an hour and a half. Like I'm not going to go to my next appointment because I'm going to be watching Saving Private Ryan. Same thing. If I know I have like 2 hours to kill, this movie's 2 hours and however long, many minutes. Sorry, I'm going to be late to my next appointment because I'm going to finish watching this film. Like there's a length to that. So anyway,
I will say that I disagree.
You don't think it's a long movie?
I really like. I definitely, back when I first watched it, like that was again one of my critiques against it. Right, was that I did feel like it was long and just kind of like whatever for a lot of the first and second act. And this time, I feel like I have the opposite thing where like, if anything, the first and second acts are my favorite parts of the movie. I think they're so well paced and I think it's so well done. And like, I think we have seen long Star Wars movies.
Yes.
And this does not feel like those, right? Like again, like I don't even think it's the worst Star Wars movie as we've seen in our rankings, or even the worst prequel movie. But I think Phantom Menace feels long.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I think nobody said that about Rogue One. What are you talking about?
I think Phantom Menace just always feels long. Even when I think about it, I'm like, it just feels like a long movie because there is not a lot of shit happening for the first 2 acts of that movie. Like it is just like we're on Tatooine for a long time. Whereas here, like, this movie is, like 2 hours and 14 minutes. Like, that to me is like, that's just like a movie length, right? Like, that to me is like, I don't think of this as like, this is a 2 or, God forbid, a 3 VHS tape long movie. Like, it's like, nah, like, this is like just a regular movie length kind of thing, right? And like, I think it moves along pretty well. Like, I think the final battle is long. I mean, it's like 45 minutes long, whatever. But like, I think that it does that it goes through everything there, and I feel like the fact that it does give each of the like cast members their own moment helps break that up a little bit more too. I think the fact that the movie doesn't end there, it ends on the space stuff with like Vader, kind of gives you like a nice kind of palate cleanse at the end.
Yeah.
And so like I actually was surprised at how much I didn't think the movie felt long. Because again, because I haven't seen the movie since it came out in theaters, and so that was my expectation going in, is like, I'm going to like it more. I'm pretty much guaranteed on that. Like, I felt pretty confident about that, but I didn't think that I would not think it was long at all. Like, and I don't. I think it actually is paced really well. I think it's one of the strengths of the movie is that it is one of the better paced Star Wars movies, especially considering both the Clone Wars animated film we just watched last week, which is not paced well, and that can feel long at times, even though it is significantly shorter. I think Rise of Skywalker felt long because it's just hell. And then I think that like Phantom Menace is just long, even though I like Phantom Menace fine. Like it's like you know, but like it definitely feels long, and I think this doesn't have those problems.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it has those problems either. My big point was like, so if I was talking about this as like as far as like a time constraint, because I was on one, like this is a film that like has that as a challenge, but I think it rises to that challenge and it accomplishes what it's going to accomplish. I think everything you said is 100% in line with what I was saying as far as like what it does with its time. It is a long film, but it spends its time incredibly well and does what I think it needs to do to validate that time sink that you put into it. Yeah. But like I said, this is a backdoor compliment to saying this is a film worth the time sink.
Yeah, I remember having conversations with people, and maybe like you might have even been one of them, Logan, or you, Cam. But I remember like talking with people when this movie first came out, and like hearing that criticism and being like, well, yeah, I mean, it feels long because it's having to introduce all these characters, knowing it's not going to get another shot at this. I think I mentioned that earlier in the show. Like, it very much is like. And so a rewatch of it where you know these characters and you kind of know where they're going makes it feel quicker as a result, because like you're getting to like just get a better sense of who these characters are compared to like especially the original trilogy characters that we know so much and have like seen so much. Like, I mean, I again, like if you watch A New Hope now in a vacuum, that movie might feel long because it's, you know, introducing so many characters to get us to the final, you know, trench run battle and the Death Star and all that stuff. But we kind of, because we've watched that original trilogy so much, like the things we know about what Han and Luke and Leia are going to do in episode 5 and episode 6, like then end up kind of like seeping into episode 4 and making it not feel as much because we're spending time with old friends or whatever it is. And so versus this largely completely new cast of characters that we kind of get introduced to and then lose all within the same movie just makes it like it is having to do a lot more legwork because of that, because it's not going to eventually get the benefit of, you know, getting to flesh out these characters more, so they had to do it really all in one, and I think it does that incredibly effectively. So it's definitely I think an interesting, especially an interesting like film, and I love hearing, Logan, that you as somebody who did kind of feel it was slow in those in your first watch, but now that you've come back to it, like I love that it felt that much faster for you, and that was very like because I know we talked about that kind of in the lead up as we've kind of been talking off camera and stuff about this movie in particular. I love that, like that your perception on this one did change in that way. Whereas like I was high on it from the beginning, and like if anything, talking about it with you guys, like I was going through and I'm like, earlier as we were going, I'm like, oh man, like if I were to rank this movie as like a standalone Star Wars movie, it might be at the top of my list. Like the original trilogy, obviously we'll get into when we kind of are talking about it. Like I think ultimately, like if I were to rank it as part of the, you know, all of the Star Wars films, it probably doesn't, because I think the original trilogy works so well together as like a unit that like all of them enhance one another. But like this movie has so like really the only thing I've nitpicked about it is the stupid little cameo of those Cantina people. Like everything else I love about this movie. And I can't, I think across the rest of the films, like I don't really have another movie where I'm like that high on everything and so low on nothing else. It's like even Last Jedi, which I love, you know, dearly and would probably put above the original trilogy, even has so many like weak elements to it that do kind of pull me back from like, you know, loving it unconditionally. So like this one, like just again talking about it and like rewatching it and you know just effusing praise on it. I'm sitting here like spoiler, I've already given it an A+ on my phone. So I just have such a great time with this one. So I think that can.
Are we in the rating section?
Yeah, I think we will seg that into our report cards where we grade it from A+ to F. So as I said, I gave away my game there. Like, yeah, this is an easy A+ for me. I think this is among the best that Star Wars has to offer, and again, the fact that it can take a movie like A New Hope, so beloved, so high in our rankings and all of our personal rankings and stuff, and like only make that movie better in hindsight is like an unheard of feat in prequels in general and stuff like that. Again, I go back to what you said, Frank. It is a prequel done right. So easy A+ from me. Frank, what would you give Rogue One here?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with pretty much everything you were saying there. Like, I think we're very much on the same page with this movie. And like, for me, like, this is my personal favorite, just like at the top. And even before rewatching them, if you would have asked me, I would have said that. And I wasn't sure how that was going to hold up. But even after, so far, the only one we hasn't watched is Solo. And I have a good feeling that's not going to take the #1 spot.
It won't.
But this is like, I know it'll probably shake out differently in the rankings, but this is my personal favorite. And so for me, this definitely gets an A+.
Excellent. Cameron, how about you? What do you want to rank this laborious film?
I'm sorry I chose a word that like has a negative connotation usually, but like that's anyway. I digress anyway.
I love it.
Back to my original point.
I appreciate it. I'm also just enjoying giving you crap for that.
That's fair. I would definitely give it an A+. It's a fantastic film.
All right. And then Logan, where do you fall on it?
First, I want to say thank you for going back to the correct order of this. Last week,
you got thrown for a week
on me last week, and I was like, "Wait, hang on, what?" Like, so I will say that I'm apparently going to rank it the lowest. I'm going to give it an A-. Still, I think it's excellent. Yeah, I mean, I thought about it before we came on, and I've thought about it a lot throughout the pod, right? Like, to me, the original trilogy is always going to be my 3 favorite movies in the Star Wars saga. I think literally almost all of them are flawless. All 3 of those movies are just, I think they work, like Trevor said, they work so well together. And like I referenced earlier, they literally are just, they're the history that all of Star Wars revolves around, right? And so I think that is reflected in terms of my rankings as well, right? Like, no matter what kind of Star Wars canon you're trying to consume, it doesn't matter if it's comics or books or video games or anything, they are always obsessed with the history of the original trilogy in some way, make some sort of reference to it. And so I think this movie does really cool and interesting things that I really, really love. I don't think it reaches the heights of any of those, but also it's hard to because those movies didn't have a history they had to live up to. They just have to make it. Yeah, for me, it's really a question of whether or not I like it more than Force Awakens, which I obviously...
I was going to note you, like, the A- grading is, like, you gave that to Force Awakens as well, and other than that, you only graded the original trilogy higher, so...
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's tough. Like, I really did not expect to be as... Like, me and Trevor have had a lot of conversations about Rogue One in the build-up to this podcast and in the build-up to this episode. And I was like, I definitely am, like, really curious about this movie. And then watching it, like, I was surprised at how much I was on board with it, right? Like, this to me feels a little bit like Any Given Day. I could go back and forth on which one I like more. I think what I will say right now is something I love about Rogue One in particular is certainly me watching it, it left me just feeling so inspired, right? And I think so moved because it is a very powerful film. And I think really the Star Wars movies that make me feel that same kind of emotion are, watching A New Hope, maybe not Empire as much, but watching Return of the Jedi. Like, they make you feel inspired, that are very emotional movies, right? Like, I think this captures those similar themes, and it also doesn't have to deal with the problematic history that is created by the sequel trilogy. So by like the skin of its teeth, I will probably give this my number 4 spot right now, and then have Force Awakens be 5th. But yeah, I think it is a great film.
Yeah. That just reminded me. I also want to give you mentioning like how inspired you feel by A New Hope and Return of the Jedi. I also do want to give some love to like the soundtrack of this, and specifically
100%.
like
I referenced it earlier,
the very like stark decision to like just immediately like burst in with music. Obviously, we don't get the normal like crawl. We don't even get the A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far Far Away. I don't think on this one.
Nope.
It's just like into the action because they wanted to set this apart from the Skywalker saga and basically set the tone for what
we do actually get A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far Far Away, which makes that cut even more dramatic.
Oh
right?
yeah,
Especially
that's true. Okay.
Especially because, no disrespect to the Clone Wars animated series, but a little disrespect, this is the first movie that anyone saw in a theater that's Star Wars that didn't have it, right? And so it's that thing of like getting to that point. Like even now, like I saw like Lucasfilm, and I was like, here's gonna be the music set or like roll up, and then like A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far Far Away, and then like nothing happens. And I was like, oh, like that's such a jarring experience. And I remember being in a theater being like, oh, this is very foreign to me. And it almost like unsettles you a little bit. Like you're so conditioned to like, these are the beats that are going to happen. And like the musical cues throughout this movie, again, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but like the way it incorporates and I think evokes so many classic original trilogy characters without most of them even appearing on screen, I thought was such a brilliant decision throughout. It is so well done, and the way that they incorporate these musical like touchstones, just absolutely great.
It is like, and it still has its own version of the Star Wars fanfare, but it is like starkly different than like what we're used to hearing. And even like the fanfare in this is almost like more jubilant and more hopeful, which is almost like undercuts what you're actually about to experience. Like it sounds so much more heroic and like, positive themed and stuff. And then it is just like a devastating war film, everybody dies kind of like suicide run movie. But yeah, shout out to that, and just it being the first movie, as you said, kind of like that anybody really saw that did break away from that formula. And I remember that like even that being like news stories of like there's not going to be a crawl in Rogue One, and people were like what it's like, well, yeah, the whole movie is basically in the crawl of A New Hope. Like you don't really need a crawl for this one. Just wanted to circle back around to give that some love as well. So time to throw this on our list of rankings. Just as a refresher for people, we have at the bottom of our list at number 10 right now, Attack of the Clones. Then we have Rise of Skywalker at number 9, appropriately. We have The Clone Wars above that, which I forgot we were even like that somehow, as bad as that was, beat out Rise of Skywalker.
Rise of Skywalker is terrible.
I mean,
if I recall correctly, Trevor was like the dissenting vote that saw that it should go below.
I'm the one who is the highest one on Rise of Skywalker, in that I would rather watch it than any of the prequels, knowing it's bad. But I would still
absolutely not.
I would still like. I just still hate I like the prequels are laborious with all of the negative connotations for me.
I like how we got like a word of the day here.
We have The Phantom Menace at number 7, Revenge of the Sith at number 6, The Last Jedi at number 5, Force Awakens at number 4, A New Hope at number 3, Empire Strikes Back at number 2, and Return of the Jedi at number 1. Also, I did want to correct myself because Logan wasn't here for The Phantom Menace. He did give that one an A+, if you recall correctly.
Oh, that's true. That's correct. Yeah, he did give it an A+.
Not correct.
Yeah. So
you weren't here, Logan, but we got your message loud and clear. A+ to Phantom Menace. Yeah.
It is a shame
A+ for midichlorians. I ultimately did correct the record when you came back on the next week, and I believe it's like a C- on your ranking or something like that.
It is a shame that I wasn't on the Phantom Menace podcast, because I feel like I would have really enjoyed to talk about the Phantom Menace with Cameron in particular, who loves it so much. Because I actually think the Phantom Menace is a really interesting movie. There's a lot of potential. Like, out of all of the prequel trilogies, that's one that like I think is rife for like a really cool, like story. I just think that it is like it bats like 60% in terms of like hitting the pitches. And there's like 40% that just doesn't work, but like it's really interesting.
There's a reason why it's like the most like redone, like theory crafted film out of the entire saga. So
yeah,
like people always start there talking about it. Like there's been plenty of video, like really great videos made of
there's some
deconstructing
really
it and keeping the good stuff, getting rid of the bad stuff, all sorts of stuff with that. So it is where it's at. But yeah.
So in our ranking, where do we want to put the opening bid for Rogue One? Logan, as you are, I think, the coolest on it. Would you just like basically start it at Force Awakens at number or like above Force Awakens at number 4 there?
Yeah, I guess, right. That's where I would say it would be go.
Yeah. Cameron, how about you? Where would you put it in our ranking?
Now this sucks because
our team ranking does not match your personal rankings and all that.
No. I'm not referring to that at all.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying it sucks because where Force Awakens ends up going and its subsequent films, it's tied to those in my mind. Like I can't do I think Rogue One's a better movie? That's like, I don't know. But I know it's better because I know where it goes and where it goes is great. Versus Force Awakens, I know where that goes and it's not too great. So like it always comes down to like where do these things end up? Especially because you're talking about these like quote unquote chained movies, the way they are. But the way that this chains itself to A New Hope is in such a terrific way, carrying the torch as you like beautifully told it, from beginning to end of how this film is really about that light of hope and carrying it forward into A New Hope. Like it does it beautifully. We didn't need fake Carrie Fisher at the end telling us that what she had in her hand was hope. Yeah. But that is, I mean, that's one of what, 3 things that we can say that's not great about this movie. So even then, like I will say, like, you know, when it comes down to it, I have to put it above Force Awakens in my mind. I don't know if it like this is the thing. The original trilogy is sacred ground to me. Mm-hmm. Like it's tough for you to. That's the thing. It's like, can it beat the original trilogy? No.
Yeah.
Definitively, no film in the saga beats the original 3. Where you place the original 3 is debatable, but it is what it is in my mind. So it is. It is 4.
Yeah,
it is number 4. I agree with Logan.
That's what I sort of said too, right? Is that because the saga is so obsessed with those 3 movies, right? Like, that is the especially like watch them all again. It's really interesting to see that like history is such a core element of the saga,
even though it doesn't tell it well.
And it doesn't tell it well most of the time, but like the fact that it is like all wrapped around these 3 movies, and part of that makes it to where like it is so hard for them to then rise above them, because those are the 3 movies not obsessed with history because they just get to make it and they're kind of free of any kind of shackles to anything else, and also because they're 3 phenomenal films that are, you know, 2 masterpieces at the very least, if not just 3 outright masterpieces. Like I think Rogue One is great. I just don't think it's as good as those movies. But we're also saying it's the 4th best movie in a pretty phenomenal series. So so that's what I would say.
Frank, where would you fall on this?
I agree with Logan and Cam. Like I know for me, like personally, I might rank it higher, but I know like this is obviously kind of like the group list, and I didn't think anything would probably break up that original trilogy. I also think, I think Trevor made a great point though, where like I think this is the best like just a movie. Like if you were just gonna watch one and never watch anything, like this is probably maybe just the best of just a movie. But then the original trilogy is like an amazing trilogy. Like if you were just gonna watch like 3 of them, like though that would be the 3 to just kind of sit down and watch there.
Yeah, even there, it would be very fascinating to talk to somebody who's only ever watched this, because obviously, like, so much of our investment in this is because we know what happens in A New Hope.
Exactly.
Sure, yeah.
That it is like it is impossible to like untangle that if you know these things. But yeah, I wonder what, like, if somebody only ever watched Rogue One, what would they think about this movie? Like,
hey, Jimmy Smith is here for a minute.
Does this work as a standalone movie outside of Star Wars? Like, does the self-contained nature of this, like this baton passing, this torch passing like element throughout the film, the sacrifice of these characters, does that like have a payoff if you don't know A New Hope, if you don't know the new trilogy or the original trilogy as a whole.
It is interesting too, because like the way this movie ends is like really ambiguous if you don't know where it goes next.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, like it just ends right there all of a sudden. That's kind of bizarre. There's no payoff on that. So like that is actually a good point too. Like if you hadn't watched anything else than just this one, it is like, oh, okay, like there's a lot of, I feel like there's a lot I'm not getting right now while watching this movie.
Yeah. So you're putting it there at number 4 as well there, Frank?
Yeah. And then the last thing I just want to throw in there is I like that obviously having these 4 movies together. Like I just think this is like like obviously the original trilogy is amazing by itself, but I think adding Rogue One makes it a great like quadrilogy of like kind of adding another movie in there. But I think we already kind of hit on all the reasons why.
Yeah, I was
Excellent
I
point.
was ready to go to bat with you if you wanted to put this like at number 1. I was ready to go to. I pulled up the Google Dice because it would have been like between us and team.
Don't Return the Jedi me again, Trevor.
Well,
don't
Logan
Return the
change.
Jedi me
If
again.
you want to do that, I can change
One of
it.
the most
That
contentious
too,
moments
though.
of this podcast.
The problem with that too, though, would be like theoretically that wouldn't be right, though, right? Because like the highest you could get is 3 if me and Cam saw the other 2 above it, right? Like in terms of like if you're in, like a weighted ranking kind of thing.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. It would basically go above, like potentially above A New Hope,
Above A New Hope,
which would be weird. But yeah, I'll keep it there at number 4 to avoid rocking the boat. But I do want to like, so I like even through this conversation, obviously, like I can now go back and see like this tweet that I had from October 17th, 2017, presumably when like Kinda Funny was doing Star Wars in review or something like that. I don't know. But or maybe it was just like people were ranking Star Wars movies and like I hopped in on that trend. But my like I had this can't be right because I have Rogue One below Force Awakens, and then I also have like it below Phantom Menace, and I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking there, but like clearly like my love of this has shifted and grown over time. So yeah, it was and basically Solo was like I definitely had some thoughts about Solo being on that one. So that will put Rogue One here snugly under the original trilogy at number 4.
A very fit in place, I think.
Yeah. Yes, and it is that. Then our top 4 are basically like Rogue One, which leads into A New Hope, which then is followed up by Empire Strikes Back,
Leads into Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. It's really fitting, yeah.
All right. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this one. After the weird detour back into, Lego Star Wars animated land of last week and stuff, we're back to the normal rigmarole of basically all the other movies -1 and The Mandalorian. So we have the recommendations being A New Hope, obviously as the immediate follow-up to this one, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, The Mandalorian, and then we get like weirdly The Rise of Skywalker, Force Awakens, Last Jedi. Wait, no, that's not right. I just did not copy that correctly. It goes into the sequel trilogy basically after The Mandalorian, Force Awakens, Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker, and then The Phantom Menace. So it is missing Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. So maybe Attack of the Clones is on there. I'm trying to. Yeah, no, it does not. That's right, because this is not one of the Skywalker sagas, so we only get 7 of the Skywalker saga films, and The Mandalorian. So yeah, both Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith are missing. Extracurriculars. Anybody else watching things on Disney Plus? I will throw out there that I watched the first episode of What If, the new animated Marvel series. Really enjoyed that. And then I also sat down and watched the first couple episodes of Behind the Attraction, which I think I talked about maybe last week of like, hey, that's a cool thing that's out there, because that is effectively like a more concentrated dose of the Imagineering story, which was, one of my favorite documentaries kind of at the launch of Disney Plus. This is very much like, hey, we're going to spend 40 to 50 minutes on different, like the making of and the behind the scenes stories of different iconic attractions at Disneyland. First episode was about the Jungle Cruise. Obviously, has a tie-in to the movie, of course, that just came out. And then episode 2 was about the Haunted Mansion. Episode 3, whenever I get around to that, is about Star Tours. So I'm very excited, to watch that as a kind of a continuation of this, the Star Wars fun that we're in. Anybody watching anything else? Nope.
No.
Just silence across the board. All right.
Sorry,
I'm clearly the only loser with too much free time. Anyway, well, that is going to do it for this episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you guys for joining me to talk about Rogue One, a Star Wars story. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to give some love to there, Cam?
Yeah, I do. I want to give a massive shout out to just a new game that came out. I kickstarted it years ago, but Boyfriend Dungeon came out. If you haven't given it a shot or checked it out, check it out. It's a super cool game. I kickstarted it, so it's not like I get anything out of it other than the free code I got. But it's a really cool game, and I just really want games like this that kind of break several molds at once to kind of be more people to be more aware of them. Because this is a super queer friendly game. It is it's great from everything that I've seen. I haven't played it yet because I'm waiting to stream it when I finally get to go back to streaming over at twitch.tv/Rev Cabot, REVCABBOTT. When I finally get to go back to doing what I love instead of working overtime, that'll be great. So
yeah, shout out to Boyfriend Dungeon. I remember playing that at a PAX, I don't know, a couple years ago or something like that. Had a great time with it. Love that it is a mashup of dungeon crawler and the dating sim kind of stuff where you're dating your weapons basically. So yeah, it came out kind of stealth dropped yesterday as part of the as of recording, as part of the Nindy event, but it also is available on Game Pass if you're an Xbox person, and also available on Steam and stuff. I remember, one of the things that's cool that I've been seeing about it is that it has a lot of kind of trigger warning friendly kind of prompts up front and stuff. And I thought that's just really cool in the things that people are highlighting that it kind of does that aren't thought about necessarily. You mentioned obviously the queer friendly nature of it. You in your character creator part, you set up your pronouns and stuff, and they have no bearing on who you can and can't date in the game. You can be they, them, and it doesn't really affect anything. It's just what you need to identify as. And then also one that I would just have never thought about myself, but this idea that they kind of give you a prompt of, hey, throughout the course of the game, you will receive text messages from a character titled Mom that are, supportive in nature. Is this okay? And if you say no, it'll turn that feature off, and you just won't get it. And it's just something I never would have thought of as a content warning, trigger warning thing for people that have disjointed relationships with their parents, or people who are hurt because their mom may have passed away or something like that. Seeing people respond to that and give that glowing praise and stuff, I'm just oh, that is clearly something I never would have thought about, because obviously I've not had a tortured relationship with my mom, save the odd one-off moments here and there, but for the most part we've had a fine relationship, so it's just never a thing I would have imagined. But seeing people respond to that, I think, is a really cool thing. And so yeah, shout out to the team behind Boyfriend Dungeon. I look forward to hopping into that this weekend myself, maybe on Game Pass or something. Cool. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give some love to there, Frank?
Yeah, just a quick shout out to our other podcast, That Nerdy Sideshow. This last episode that you can listen to right now is a Suicide Squad spoiler cast. Sorry, let me clarify. It's The Suicide Squad spoiler cast. It is not a spoiler cast for the original. Yeah. But it is a great movie, and we had a great time talking about it. So I definitely recommend that one.
I almost loathe that they called it The Suicide Squad, especially because I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the naming convention I use when we do a spoiler cast episode on That Nerdy Site Show is that blah 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 spoiler cast. And so I had to call this the Suicide Squad spoiler cast, and I'm just like, I hate that. I hate but whatever, I got to do it. So for branding, all in the sake of branding. But yes, that was absolutely a fun conversation. Sitting down with Frank and Cameron to talk about the Suicide Squad, especially given I think we were all very high on it, and me being the coolest because of the violence just not being my thing.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a fun conversation, fun chat with you guys about it.
Especially since I had never seen the original. So
there you go.
We had a great time.
When Logan eventually makes it
Lucky.
around to seeing it, I look forward to chatting about it with him as well and seeing what he thought.
I'm very
about
excited.
the film. Whether we do that on a
Especially because the
podcast
first one's
or
trash.
off camera, yeah.
Yeah.
But yes. Speaking of, you can follow Logan at Lefty Logie. Anything you want to give some love to there, Logan?
I will give a shout out to this week's episode of That News You Care About, where myself and Trevor sat down to talk about the latest happenings over at Fulbright and the news surrounding that studio in the past week now. We also talked about the fact that this upcoming week we'll have a happy-themed episode after a real rough streak of weeks the past month or so of really heavy news topics. We're gonna do something fun and light for episode 69.
Actually, I was wrong when I told you that. I had mislabeled, so it's actually only episode 68. So we're still
episode 69 prequel next week. Get ready, guys. The prequel to the good stuff is gonna be next week for me and Trevor, so that'll be fun as well. So stay tuned for that
somehow
episode.
episode 68 will only make episode 69 better.
Exactly, you get it.
Cool. Well, you can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey, and I guess the last of the things I will give a shout out to is the Let's Plays. This week I did a dual Let's Play of Final Fantasy, basically. I revisited because of where I'm at in the playthrough on the NES Classic of that series. I went through and played the opening kind of chapter of the original Final Fantasy game. And then on Thursday, I played basically that same chunk of the game, but in the Pixel remaster that just came to Steam in the last couple weeks. And I basically set up the Warriors of Light as the four of us. So I had Cameron as the warrior, myself as the black mage, both of those characters inspired by our corresponding characters in Final Fantasy XIV online. And then I had Logan as the white mage and Frank as a thief to round out our party. And as I've touched on in I think in the promo tweets on it, the white mage, notoriously a very weak character, but Logan out there just wrecking shop with his little wooden staff. So shout out to Logie, because especially in the NES Classic version where we were limited to 4 characters for our names. Go check those out. I especially love the fact that the first one, playing that opening chunk, is about an hour because of the grinding you need to do kind of in that original late 80s era of playing the game. Actually, I think it came to States in 90. And then it takes about half the time to do it in the follow-up Pixel remaster because of all the quality of life changes that that happen. You level up quicker and you can speed up time and stuff like that. So shout out to the Pixel remasters. Now I just hope they come to a console I will actually want to play them on. So yeah, go check out all those Let's Plays or all of our Let's Plays on youtube.com/thatnerdysite, where we also post the video versions of these podcasts. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please remember to rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always help support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, class dismissed, and may the force be with you.